everyone, welcome back to another commentary. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
Today, Eric and I, by request from Malik Myers, are going to chat about Hellboy, which is a movie that Malik's been asking us to do for a long time. We're finally getting to it, and meant to do this back before the new one came out, but we didn't get around to it, and then Malik finally officially requested it, and so now we're knocking it out. And Eric, I had not seen this since the Rewind, probably. I mean, it's been nearly a decade.
Really?
Yeah, and of course I did go back and rewatch it for this, but I mean it had been forever, and I had a very different experience with it than I did last time I saw it.
Oh, interesting. This isn't a movie that it's not like a constant rewatch, but like I go back to this pretty frequently.
Do you?
At least once a year.
So is this one of those things where when you watch it, you always watch the sequel with it? Because
No.
I would have a hard time watching this movie and not wanting to immediately watch Golden Army because I think it's a better movie, and because I think this has the X-Men thing. I think this is so much of a setup film that I kind of just want to skip to the sequel.
Oh, I don't agree at all.
Oh, interesting.
I think they are equal films. I think they are both flawed, but they have different good parts. They have
the same problems, though, don't they?
They have similar problems. Golden Army is borderline Hellboy fan fiction. Like,
oh, weird.
Golden Army is all Del Toro. And that's rough as a fan.
And see, I'm not.
It doesn't kill the movie, but like, this is more Hellboy. So
okay.
If I'm thinking Hellboy, I'm going to go to this before I go to that. I mean, I really like the second movie. I really like both these movies, but they have different pros and cons.
I think that's just telling us our preferences, right? Because
this is also,
you know, I'm not a big occult guy. I've not read a lot of Hellboy,
yeah.
So maybe I like Del Toro's sensibilities more than I like Mignola's sensibilities. I don't know.
Except that what's weird is that second movie should be a Hellboy movie because we do a lot of folklore.
Yeah, that's true.
That's not a folklore movie. It's all made up. Like, what's really cool about the comics is he oftentimes just retells folklore stories with Hellboy in them.
Sure.
It's reading Hellboy is almost like an education in like world, not mythology, but like folklore. Like and I'm really disappointed that movie's not like that.
Where like urban legends come from, that kind of thing.
Well, no, like I mean like actual like sometimes it'll be like weird, like it'll be like an Indonesian like myth, and we will just play it out.
Yeah.
And like just it's really interesting how he does that. And as Hellboy goes on, it gets further and further away from the stuff that is this movie. Like the pulpy roots kind of start going away, and like the Nazis and stuff, and like it becomes this like mythic, like legendary kind of tale. And so like 2 is also the very human side of Hellboy, which is all the movies. And so like I like 2, but like I don't need to watch both these together. Like, I'll just watch 2 or I'll just watch 1. Like, you know. I think they're equal films. I think they're both very good, but they're in different ways.
Interesting. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get into it and see if I have anything else to say, because
Beyond. I like the second one better.
Yeah, well, Hellboy's not a big thing for me. I've not read enough of it.
And a lot of people disagree with you.
About what?
About 2. A lot of people think it's worse. Like, a lot worse. Like a lot of people see it almost like Batman Returns.
Well, and again, that's from the last time I saw it, which was a long time ago. Because these are not movies I've gone back to.
It's not, and like not necessarily like comic people. Like I remember, and it wasn't super well received. Like right out of the gate. Like I remember like meeting people, and like Hellboy would come up like, "Oh yeah, except that second one, that sucked." And I was like, "Really?"
That's so interesting because, and you probably know this, the first time I saw this movie, I went to the theater and I didn't like it, and I fell asleep during it.
I didn't either. We've talked about this. My description of Hellboy the first time I saw it, when does this come out? 04? I am 13 years old.
And you had the same thing. You just couldn't get into it.
I described the movie to people as if it was playing backwards. Like, I thought it was, like, really hard to follow. But I'm not alone, because he talks about that in the commentary, that people thought the movie was incredibly hard to follow, and the second one is almost over-explanatory, which he talks about in the commentary was like, everyone had a hard time. And we've had this conversation at some point, maybe on After Dark, or maybe it was just privately, but we've had this conversation that had Hellboy come 10 years later, the exact same movie, I don't think we would have had that. I think Hellboy was doing things we weren't regularly doing in cinema yet. And so when it came out, it was so much, and now we do a lot of that stuff. The Lovecraftian things and the like. I don't know if the first Hellboy is as unique and special in 2019 as it was in 2003. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I
had
think
that experience watching it this time. And the big, I mean, I don't want to talk too much before we start the movie, but I think the big thing for me is a bunch of Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. This is weird to watch in a post-Marvel world.
I mean, I think this is better than most Marvel movies. But
well, sure, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of the iconography and things that show up in this have now shown up in Marvel movies, and it doesn't feel new anymore. Like,
yeah, well, and it's just,
and obviously that's going to happen. But we've had a million comic book movies since this, but
and on the occult side, like we've done a lot more things in TV show, especially as CGI has gotten cheaper, and we can do more of this stuff in both movies and TV, and like we're just more familiar with a lot of this stuff, and I think that makes it. I think this film is more accessible in 2019 than it was in 2003. But
maybe a little bit less special.
But it's just interesting that it wasn't like it wasn't just my experience or just your experience. Like, it was a big enough experience that he talked about in the commentary for the second one that people thought the first film was impenetrable. Which is interesting because it seems so simple going back to it. It doesn't feel difficult to follow at all.
I know. And then what changed between 2004 when this came out and 2010, 2011 when I reviewed it? Mm-hmm. I don't know. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. If you want to watch it with us, and we encourage you to do so, get out your DVDs, your Blu-ray, or watch it on Netflix. At the moment, it is still on Netflix. The sequel's not, but this is. And get it to timestamp 0.
And this has been on Netflix forever.
For a long time.
But I don't ever remember seeing the second one.
I don't know if it was ever there. Yeah. But get it past all the menus, get it timestamp 0, and get ready to press play when I say now. Here we go. Everybody, please press play right now. I was very surprised when this was first advertised. I didn't hear this announced or anything back then. I saw posters first, and I was like, what is Hellboy? And how did this thing I've never heard of get greenlit before so many other comic projects? Because this comes out the year after Daredevil. There's so much stuff we haven't gotten to yet. There's a Hellboy movie before there's a Ghost Rider movie. There's a Hellboy movie before we finally got to Iron Man. It's crazy.
But when you look back, it actually makes more sense when you think about it. Because it lists the page number, page 87.
I mean, wouldn't that depend on... Well, I was going to say your copy, but there's probably just one, right? Like,
but
it's a sacred book, dude.
But throughout it, that's actually more... The big ones, Marvel and DC, are the ones that struggled. But, like, Ninja Turtles comes out real fast. Tank Girl comes out real fast.
What a good point.
Like, because those are passion projects. They're small indie things that someone sees and goes, I really like this. Because that's why this gets made. It gets made because Del Toro wants to make it.
Yeah. I had forgotten that. That's a good... Well, yes, and of course, because that's why you had such a hard time making the third one happen.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because when you look at Hellboy, so, like, I've got all of Hellboy in those hardcovers. I think you've seen my Hellboy hardcovers. There are
that's a pretty
5 of those, and then In Hell, which I don't own yet. But there are 5 of those. Only the first 2 books had been published by the time they make this movie, maybe? I'm not even sure if all of the second volume had come out, but, like...
So it's very new.
There are the 2 big first miniseries, and then a bunch of, like, short, like, 1-issue, 2-issue, 5-page stories. There is not a lot to pull from when he is making this movie, and I think that's fascinating, but, like, he just, like, immediately, like, loved it and was like, I want to make this movie. Because, like, Hellboy's in some level of production very quickly.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. But, like, just my perspective at the time where I'm like, I've never heard of this. How did this get made? So, like, it feels weird, but, like, when you look into it, it makes sense that happened. I mean, Spawn was that way, too.
Yeah, Spawn's that way, too. Spawn, at least, was like, a phenomenon, though.
Yeah, that was a thing that, like... He's shopping around before he starts to try to make it. Like, somebody's backing it early, as opposed to Ninja Turtles, where it's like, we're making this movie now. How do we get it distributed? It's like New Line wasn't there from the beginning, if memory serves.
I don't think so, because that's an independent movie. They distribute it, but they're not, like, financing it.
Yeah.
This is a little bit bigger than that, but it's
Absolutely.
But
And this feels like a big movie.
yeah, which is interesting because it's not.
Especially because there's so much like ambition and attempted envelope pushing with CG, and some of that stuff doesn't hold up great, but I respect what we're trying to do, and trying things that we haven't necessarily done before, and the scale we're trying.
Well, and Del Toro's also so good at the CG enhancement. Like, that's the thing that everyone always, like, Del Toro is the filmmaker everyone brings up whenever someone complains about CGI, where it's like, why can't you just do it like Del Toro? Why does Thanos have to be a big purple man? Why does he have to be a big CGI purple man? Why can't you just put that actor in prosthetics and makeup and digitally enhance it like Del Toro does?
Yeah.
Because Del Toro still does that in everything. You haven't seen Shape of Water, right?
No.
Like, that's a completely, like, real fish costume, like, Fishman costume that they made. Abe Sapien is a completely real Fishman.
Now, I don't think Abe Sapien is really enhanced much, though, is he?
He blinks. I don't think that's...
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
But there's not, like, a bunch of stuff added in post.
But...
And it helps to make some of the CG feel more believable when there's so much practical stuff done in general. Not just enhancing the CG, but the fact that we built all these sets. And, like, it's... there's a lot of stuff that physically is there that you can see.
And, it's interesting that you had that reaction, because I didn't, but for some reason I never had the thought, period, because, like, Hellboy happened, and, like, Constantine happened, and, like, I was like, okay, like, I think just in my brain I was like, well, the dark ones get made into movies.
Sure.
Like,
I started to have that thought once we got to Constantine, because I also was kind of surprised that got made when it did.
And I was always excited, like that movie...
And then we started wanting to do more of that stuff after Sin City.
Yes. Well, and Sin City, again, like a smaller... like, the first Sin City is, like, what, 92, 93? Like, also a newer...
It was only a decade after.
Yeah, this used to be the way... These used to be the ones that got made. Like, retrospectively, when you look at it as a pattern, you're like... it's... Oh, these ones.
And the big stuff like Spider-Man winds up in development hell forever because it's a bunch of fingers in a pie and a bunch of people that are, wanting a big cut of what they're assuming will be massive profits, as opposed to and like trying to find the right director as opposed to a person with a vision that just shops it.
This makes a minor alteration to the comics. Well, okay, so this makes a major and minor alteration to the comics, but this one here specifically makes sense, but I think maybe retrospectively is too obvious. In the comic, he has two gloves.
We're talking about Rasputin.
Rasputin has two gloves. In the movie, I think it telegraphs Hellboy's hand.
Yeah.
Because my mom got it, and my mom doesn't pick up on, like, subtle things like that. So when my mom was like, yes, of course, like the hand at the beginning, I was like, maybe that's too obvious.
I kind of like it, though.
Yeah, I don't dislike it necessarily, but...
Is it... Maybe she wouldn't have picked up on it if we didn't make such a big deal out of the hand when we see baby Hellboy?
You might be right.
Because I don't know that I would have even remembered that he had that. Mm-hmm. I didn't think about it until you just brought it up.
The other change that's made... the other major change is... Well, we don't do any of this. We don't see the Agdu Jahad in their prism. Prison. I guess it's also a prism. In the
That's
comic,
very Superman too, isn't it?
Yes. In the comic, it is very... It's much subtler. There are two separate locations. They are doing their occult... The Nazis are doing their occult ceremony here, and then I think the good guys are at Stonehenge doing like a counter ceremony. They're not even in the same location. This is much more economic, and one of those things where, like, it's so much simpler. You'd think if they'd thought of it, they would have done it that way in the first place.
We got a Wilhelm scream in the first 5 minutes.
Also, that Nazi guy is modeled after a character called, I think it's von Klempt, something like that, who has a swastika monocle, who is in the remake. You remember that guy with that big...
Oh, yeah, I do now.
Yeah.
That's the most Miller kind of thing I can think of.
Yeah.
That sounds like a very Frank Miller idea.
Well, I mean, these ones are actually Nazis. Most of the times his characters are not literally Nazis.
The soldier with the metal mask and the knives, is that the same
Cronin.
guy that shows up later?
Yes.
I
Yes.
just couldn't remember.
He is also completely different. In the comics, he's like a bureaucrat. Like, he's just a guy in a gas mask. He is not, like, the badass, like, super killer. That is all for the movie. And he's awesome in the movie.
Yeah, I
that
like
was
him a lot.
one of the... And I knew that when I went to the comics. It was still disappointing for me when I started reading Hellboy comics. I was like, oh, like, he's just a guy.
Yeah, it's an inspired design.
Yeah.
But you know what it reminds me of now? It reminds me of the Talons from the Court of the Owls.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. But I think all of this is... I think this is a fantastic opening.
It is, especially in... Well, just because it's the big thing that makes it feel so grand in the first place. Like, it helps it feel like a bigger movie than it is. And then...
That CG didn't hold up great.
It does... No, it doesn't. We're going to point out a lot of those. But it does... And he cannot do fire. Like, or this movie cannot do fire. But it's...
There's fire. That fire looks fine.
Well, that's probably actually fire, Eric. I'm talking about the blue fire
That's
with
what we
Liz.
used
It looks
fire
really bad.
in movies.
But no, this does a really good job of setting the tone, giving you a sense of how heightened this universe is.
Yeah, it immediately
of
gives
that.
you everything that it is. Like, it gives you the horror stuff. It gives you the heightened pulpy nature. It gives you Nazis. It gives you a cult. Like,
It tells you that...
It tells you we're going to space, kind of.
Yes, it tells you that it is going to be a serious movie, but that you also
have
shouldn't
fun.
take it too seriously. Mm-hmm. It nails all that right away, and
They always say that, like, a great screenplay, the first scene should tell you what the whole movie is.
Yes.
And this is that. This
Yeah.
is the whole movie.
And it's a big risk to take, because setting it in the past like this, it feels like it's setting up a different movie. Like you start with this big period piece thing, and then you run the risk of, okay, the rest of the movie is not going to be like this, and it feels squarely in the same universe.
Also, something that I think feels less weird now.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Like, I think this opening, we've done this a lot now.
Yeah.
Less so...
It's a weird movie to watch after First Avenger now.
Yeah.
It really is. And I don't just mean because of Nazis, I mean because of Nazis with all the crazy super science and stuff.
Well, and you'll always talk about Kirby and how much he loves Kirby. We will actually get a Kirby homage in this. I will point out when we get to it.
The space thing I did not remember.
The Agdu Jihad and all of that?
Yeah. And it makes me question the whole paranormal thing in the first place. Well, because it feels like science fiction before it feels like paranormal, before it feels like fantasy.
It's...
Like we have a Bureau of Paranormal Investigation, and they all talk about it like it's Cthulhu or something, but it comes from space.
That's where Cthulhu... Well, that's how Cthulhu comes from, but, like, Azathoth is the mad god, the center of the universe. Like, a lot of those are the older god, the old gods are from space.
Okay. But, like, it's from, like a big technological thing that's in like...
No, it's crystals.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was a machine. Like...
No.
Okay.
No. It is a big Cthulhuan entity that's been trapped inside those crystal things.
I was very confused about that.
We get an origin for them in the comics that comes out right before this movie, right around this movie. They'd never been shown in the comics outside of showing that prison.
Okay.
And Mignola was like, well, he's using them at the end of the movie, like, I should show them for real first in the comic before the movie gets to do it. And I'll also give their origin. And it's very mythical. It's tied into God and heaven and angels. And, like, kind of like the story of... who's the one that brings the fire?
Prometheus.
Prometheus. It's tied in kind of to the Prometheus. It's very... Mignola is maybe... Him and Neil Gaiman are, like, the best at making up fables that sound like real fables. Where, like, it has just the level of, like, insanity and, like... And then this happened, you're like, well, that doesn't make sense, but that is exactly how Greek mythology plays.
But yes, Hellboy is too cartoony looking.
I agree. But he doesn't... I don't think that dates terribly.
It was more of a cartoon than I remembered it.
Yeah.
So I am obviously not in any way whatsoever qualified to be here.
And this shot coming up is right from the comics. The picture they take is straight out of the comics.
I want to throw the criticism at this movie that, and I'm not sure, that perhaps
That's right.
It's difficult to appreciate as much if you're not already familiar with the material. I feel like it might be one of those.
I don't know, because I know so many people that love this movie.
Okay.
That don't care about the comics or haven't read the comics.
Just for me personally, I think the problem might just be that this kind of material doesn't immediately resonate with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not down on this movie. I gave it a pretty glowing review when I did the Rewind 10 years ago, but like I said, I did, because like I like a lot of the character stuff we're doing with Hellboy, and it's a really nice, like, fresh take at the time on the what makes a man idea, and the nature nurture stuff, and the like you look like a monster but you have to be a monster, that whole thing. I like all that a lot. I'm not as interested in the mythology of this universe, and there's not enough of the character stuff for me, which is probably why I like the second one more. The way you were describing it, but it's been a long time since I've seen that. So I'm wondering. I always like the Hellboy logo there. It looks like a maze.
Yeah, it's 89.
Because it is that.
We saw that comic cover. We're going to see it again later. That is a riff on a Jack Kirby Thor cover. Like, it's intentionally supposed to be like, that's really in this universe, Jack Kirby made a Hellboy comic. But you're saying,
and it is really nice that it has so much reverence for comics.
Yes, well, and Del Toro loves
for
comics.
for that medium, not just for the material this is based on. But yeah, so that's just a question I'm asking, because it might just be like I'm not latching on enough to the mythology and like getting enough of what's going on because I don't care as much about the occult stuff. But to hear you talk, it sounds like I might appreciate some of this more if I read the material.
Well, except it deviates, because like the stuff that I was just talking about, like that's not in the movie. Like that wasn't even made when the movie was being made, or it was being made when the movie was being made. But we know that what Del Toro planned for the third movie would have been even more going off in his own direction. So like all of that mythology stuff. I'm trying to think of the obvious comparison. I can't immediately, but like, it is very separate. Like the movie series has its mythology, and the comics have their mythology, and they're similar, but they're not the same. And part of that's because
I don't know, Kingsman, not really.
Well, Kingsman's a completely different
thing. I know.
But part of that's because Mike Mignola didn't plan most of this. Yeah. Like, it just kind of naturally developed as he was making this story over 25 years. So he didn't know what the origin of the Agdu Jihad was till he sat down to write it. So, like, that's all stuff from the comics, but like, a lot of that stuff didn't even exist when this movie was being made.
It's always interesting when something gets made like this, like, in the middle of someone telling a story.
Yeah.
But based on it.
I also think it's interesting that I think this movie was incredible for Hellboy, because I didn't know about Hellboy, and I think this movie brought Hellboy to a lot of people's attention. I think Hellboy would have continued to be a much smaller comic without this movie. Those eyes are CGI. He's going to open his eyes. Those aren't really there. That's because there was a subplot that they cut about him not having eyes.
Oh, weird.
And it's in the director's cut.
And that looks like they're looking at the Weapon X program.
But I think it's really impressive that he didn't let this movie influence him. Mignola didn't let this movie influence him at all. Like, he doesn't start bringing in elements from the movie. A lot of this is not in the comics, and he continues to not have it in the comics. And I think that's really cool. But if this was like exactly the comics, right now we would be watching him. Professor Broom get mauled to death by frogs, and he would never appear again. He dies immediately in the comics.
Yeah, and he's a major character in the film.
Yeah. And we get flashback stuff, but like present day timeline stuff, like he's not a character. He dies immediately.
That's really interesting.
As I said in the review for the reboot, Hellboy doesn't have daddy issues. He's not hung up on his father. There's not like trying to he's not trying to live up to an image. for his father. He's also not, like, angry. Like, none of that. A lot of the character stuff in this movie is not from the comics. The romance is not from the comics.
Well, I think the romance is a little heavy-handed.
Mignola's always said that he just can't write that.
So he just doesn't do it?
He just doesn't. And that's what Hellboy is.
I see the romance is heavy-handed. My issue is more the love triangle, which works itself out okay at the end, but is a slog to sit through until you get there, is my opinion. And that's one of the big things that makes this feel more Hollywooded than I think Del Toro intended it to feel. That feels shoehorned in for the ladies or whatever.
I think that the love triangle aspect, like specifically the triangle, or the romance entirely?
Or that it focuses as hard on the romance as it does.
I think that's a Del Toro choice, and that would have been there regardless. I think Myers, if not necessarily a studio
decision... It's the most by
committee
seeming thing in the film to me.
I think it's important for Hellboy. It's how he defines himself as a man, and it's the...
Yeah, and I agree, and we get there by the end. It's just watching it happen until the conclusion of it.
Because I think the best thing in Hellboy 2 is the what happens after Happily Ever After thing. I think Hellboy 2 is one of the most important relationship movies ever made, because no one ever makes that movie. It's always the... And I appreciate that this is the...
Because they always break up before the movie starts, and we just don't even let that happen.
Or just we just never make a follow-up. Like, people get together at the end. It's the...
You don't see them have to try to maintain it or whatever.
I love this movie's Beauty and the Beast, but he doesn't turn back into a handsome prince at the end. Like, we are our flaws, and we have to accept each other as we are. I think there's a lot of really beautiful relationship stuff in this movie.
Well, she's also allowed to be flawed, too.
Yeah,
in a similar way, except not physically.
And it's how they fit together, because he's the only person that she can really, like, be passionate with because of her fire, because he's fireproof, although he burns his fingers later, and it's dumb. But
so he's literally the only person she could be with, but he's also not human, so that's weird.
Yeah, but she likes him the way he is, and like, it's a much better love story than 95% of love story movies. And I think the second movie
I'm complaining about the love triangle.
It's all Myers, and I don't think Myers was necessary. It's been a while since I listened to the commentary, but if I had to harbor a guess, I would guess that Myers is not a studio note, it's a preemptive decision, where the studio's going to say this movie's too weird, so I will put in an Eisen character.
Yeah, and he feels like an Eisen character.
And he's not there in the sequel.
Yeah, they didn't need him. And I think this actor does a good job. I think he's fine.
Yeah, he is standard leading man. Like, I can think of like 6 other actors that he could have been, like, at this same time. He could have been the guy from Eurotrip. He could have been, I can't think of it. There's a guy since he's in the opening and closing of Sin City, that guy in the elevator. Josh Hart now.
Yeah, I don't know why I was thinking people like Chris O'Donnell.
He would have been a little old at this point.
Yeah, it's true, but in his day.
But yes.
He could have been anybody.
Green tomatoes, Chris O'Donnell.
Sure.
I
mean, maybe it's a good idea to give Liz a normal person to have a choice.
Temptation.
Yeah, but she's not really tempted.
No.
I mean, they get along okay, but like when they go on their date, it's a date to Myers. It's not so much for Liz.
And that is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Not that side of it, but the Hellboy and the kid side, I think is hilarious and adorable.
I'm too distracted by that kid actor. He thinks he's on a stage play and not in a film, and it bothers me.
I really like the two of them.
I didn't have that
before,
but I watched it. When I watched it this time, I was like, that kid.
I think
good call. Yeah.
I think there's a statue in here that's Roger, who's a homunculus from the comics that Del Toro really, really wanted to be in one of these movies, but could never find a place for. Like, he wanted to be in the second movie, and he couldn't find a place for the second movie.
And it's nice that he doesn't just shoehorn things in and force it because he wants to see it.
Also, somewhere in here is the Devil's...
The new movie did that in spades.
Yes. Also, somewhere in here is the Devil's Backbone from Del Toro's film, The Devil's Backbone. Like, there's some cool stuff in that. In there. I like this huge Looney Tunes-esque door that Hellboy lives behind.
Yeah, it's great.
I also think it's interesting, like, he can leave. Like, he's not a prisoner, but he lives behind this giant door. But I guess that makes sense because when you do not want him to leave because they said he's they just said he's grounded, you have to be able to keep him there. Like, you can't just, like, do a, like, you know, you can't just do a lock.
I think it's interesting that they have the Men in Black thing where they don't want anybody to know about this paranormal stuff, but they're not actually holding him against his will, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And he, like they treat him like a person. He has rights, which is a lot more altruistic than you would expect a movie like this based on a dark comic. That's really cool.
Yeah, well, and that also is not in the comics. They're a public organization.
Oh, really?
They are not a secret society.
So everybody knows about him.
Everybody knows
so there's
about
no
him.
Men in Black.
Yeah, no, none.
From the beginning.
He's a paranormal investigator. Like, he shows up at people's door, and they're like, well, you look kind of weird.
I get the sense, and again, I don't know Del Toro's thought process, but that's another thing that makes this feel sort of like or more like a studio film, where if we want this world to look more like the one that we live in, it has to be a secret. Otherwise, it wouldn't be affecting culture. If people knew about this all this time, then the culture would be different.
And when you get to, like, the BPRD comics, like, it really affects the world.
Yeah.
Like, cities get wiped out, and they don't get magically put back.
And that's also where this feels more like an origin thing, where it's like, maybe that world we could get to eventually, but we're not there
we do
yet.
it straight up in the second one. Like, he comes out publicly.
And I really expected that to happen in this movie. The first time I saw it, where I kind of figured the end of this would be like the I'm Iron Man thing, and they don't do that. Because they make such a big deal out of nobody knows, or people suspect and they've heard of Hellboy. It's not the Men in Black thing in the sense that people aren't just ignoring what they don't want to believe in. Everybody's trying to figure out if he's real or not, or if he's just an urban legend or like aliens. And I like that whole bit that we just saw on TV where
why are the pictures always
we're talking
blurry?
about how the pictures are always blurry. I mean, that's great. Like, a lot of people have seen him. By the way, this movie could not work now because everybody's got cell phones and would have taken his picture.
Well, in the second movie...
This is like the last year where this would even work.
In the second movie, they talk about footage of Hellboy, and he's like, I hate YouTube. But I also... there's a bit in the opening credits, which I think is really economical in how they show you, like, those headlines and, like, the credits tell you he is an urban legend and people don't know he exists without
it's a
like
really
a single
nice
word
way to
of,
do exposition.
But there's one that's just footage, and it's the there's a famous shot, and we recreate it in Signs as well, where it's the person, I can't remember what the actual thing is in the real world thing, but it's like a birthday party. It's just this thing walking, and it turns and looks at the camera and then keeps walking. We do that shot with Hellboy. It's very cool. I can't remember what the thing is in real life. I think it might have been Bigfoot.
That's really interesting. And see, some of that kind of stuff just goes over my head because this is not a part of...
I really like this song.
You know, I do too.
This is Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. They have a cover of Staggered Lee I like quite a bit.
Was that a song they wrote for this movie?
No.
Or did they just get lucky that they found a song that seemed to fit the tone of this movie that mentioned a red right hand?
No, it's a song from like the 80s.
Well, that's amazing.
And it's the opening credit song for the show Pinky Blinders, starring Cillian Murphy. It's a Netflix show. It was one of their early ones. I saw a little bit of it. It's good.
I didn't know Cillian Murphy ever did a show.
Yeah, it's like
cool.
a 30s mob show.
Interesting. I've never heard of that.
It was big for a little bit, and then, you know, like all Netflix shows, it got canceled. Nobody ever talks about it again. So
one thing that I appreciated, at least the attempt of in the reboot movie that everybody hates, and that I don't think is very good, but I don't think it's as bad as some people make it out to be. I mean, I don't like it, but I don't think it's the worst thing I've ever seen.
I think some people overliked it because they were like...
Just pushing back against
because, I mean, we said this in our review, like, this is not a 7% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, this is a 30-40% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, it was too critically lambasted. I think some people pushed back even further. We're like, it's not that bad. Like, it's a good movie. Like our thing was like, it's not that, like... It's followable, like it has a structure, it's just kind of bland. But like I've seen a couple people be like, no, you're going too far. It's genuinely good. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I'll go that far. It's not bad.
But what I was going to say is, I kind of appreciate that it tries to be a little bit more stylistic. Like the comics.
You think than this?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, I think this is super stylistic.
Ooh, I don't.
Okay. We do a lot with shadows. We do a lot of, like, backgrounds like that. Like, that's a Hellboy cover.
Yeah, but
and it's very bright with the colors.
Yeah, but looking at the comics, I would have gone with a more alien color palette in the first place. Like, again, it feels like a studio movie to a degree in that it's trying to look like the world we live in, but this is all going on in the background. And I don't think that's the right take for this material. I mean,
that's not how it is in the comics.
I think that, exactly, and I think that Del Toro makes it as, like, the story and the way he shoots certain things is stylized. The look of it, not so much.
See, I actually
it
disagree.
opens with something that looks pretty stylized.
I disagree. I think it's really
once we get
stylized.
to the present day,
I think it's and part of it's just how Del Toro shoots things, but everything's so orange or blue, and there's a lot of, like, whenever we go outside, it's just like smog and smoke, and, like, I think it's a very stylized world.
Okay.
And they shot in Prague, which is one of the weirdest looking places in the world. That building that we use for the BPRD is a very weird looking building. I've seen in something else recently. I was like, oh, we shot there, but they were one of the first movies to shoot in Prague. A lot of people shoot in Prague now, but, like, they picked Prague because it was weird and cheap. But, like, the architecture is intentionally, like, very strange and.
I think it's like Ninja Turtles for me, where the only way I could ever get what I want is fully animated or like a Sin City kind of thing.
Yes.
I think that's the problem, is that I want it to look more like the comics do, and that's impossible with human beings.
And that's fair.
Maybe that's the issue.
And
I want Mignola drawings, and I can't have that if it's in live action. So
what
I'm asking for is what I'm asking for is not fair, but I still think they could have gone farther with the color palette.
And it's interesting because it's also not what Mignola wants, and you'll never get. He wants everyone that takes his work to do their version of it, which is why the animated movies look the way they do.
Oh, so
he doesn't want Screw-On Head.
Interesting.
And he doesn't like Screw-On Head because all he sees...
He doesn't want a carbon copy.
No, because all he sees is the ways that they did his style wrong. He wants you to do your version.
So he's fine with adaptation.
Yes.
He doesn't at all have the Alan Moore thing.
Entirely, yeah.
But he wants it to be a new thing.
And it's also why he wouldn't let Del Toro do the third movie in comics, is... The comics are my place.
Yeah.
The movies can be the movies.
But if he'd done it like animated or come up with some other way to do it,
maybe.
he would have been fine with it. If he just wrote a novel, he'd probably be fine with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't want that, but...
No. But budget would not be a concern.
Well, right.
Samael looks good, also not from the comics. We get a lot of creatures, but Samael is not one of them. He kind of looks like he takes maybe a little bit of inspiration from the pig guy.
Is that the giant dog thing?
Yeah, what he's fighting right now.
I assumed that was comic book, because they keep calling it Seed of Destruction. I thought that was a comic book thing.
No, in the comic book, Hellboy Seed of Destruction. That's just.
I see.
That's just.
See, I really don't know a lot about this world, and anything I used to know, I've probably forgotten because it's been so long.
That's just that's a nod for the fans.
Okay.
But no, Samael is entirely
Isn't
created
there
for
a
this.
video game called that?
Seed of Destruction?
Yeah.
Specifically a Hellboy one, or just a game? Maybe.
No, I thought there was a Hellboy game called that.
Maybe that Dreamcast one.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
The guy who plays...
like this stuff outside is a lot more...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I'm like, no, the world looks super stylized.
No, that's... Yeah. I really shouldn't be here. I really should just let Eric do this entire...
I really like the actor who plays Rasputin. I don't know who he is. And I'm sure... I probably could have seen him in other things. He's just unrecognizable because he's not bald and has a beard.
Watch me the only movie he ever did.
But he looks pretty close to the comic book guy. His beard's not as full and crazy as comic Rasputin. But, like, he's exactly what he needs to be. He's as menacing and sinister as... Like, I wouldn't describe him as charismatic. Like, he's not a memorable villain, but he's exactly the right choice for this role.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I don't know who he is. Like, I pulled up the cast. I have no idea who Rasputin is. And I don't know the girl either, the girl that plays Ilsa. Carl Roden. He's in The Born Supremacy, so you've seen him in something. And he's in Blade 2.
One thing, character-wise, that I think this movie, and like...
The Samael CG still looks alright.
Yeah, it's better in the dark,
Yes.
as you would expect. But yeah, but interpersonal conflict wise, the thing this movie really nails is keeping characters like believable and relatable while allowing them to have major animosity to each other, and not resolving things in a super easy and obvious way. And we have that with Hellboy's relationship with Myers, and we also have it with the agent that went on TV earlier. And we'll talk about it later, obviously. But I think my favorite scene in the whole movie is the cigar bit.
It's a very good one.
I love it so much because we're so subtle about it, and we just have this really nice human moment where they say, "Yeah, you know what? We don't hate each other."
And it's also not two guys
that
talk much. It makes sense that
you're right. They wouldn't have a whole conversation about it.
No, they just...
And we
they
never
both
have
know.
to talk about it again. And then in the next movie, they just get along better. I mean, I think he's in the next movie,
He is in this next movie, but they don't actually get along much better.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
Because
I haven't seen that in a long time.
Because Hellboy keeps pushing the envelope because he wants to be seen.
Oh, that's right.
There's a bit that we just saw with Samael where he runs past because it's Halloween, which I guess makes this a Halloween movie.
I like Red Bean Stop a lot.
Me too.
Do you like the I keep saying Hollywood. Do you like the big Hollywood one-liners in this? Because I'm fine with most of them. I think they're fun. And also it may, like you just said, that's a really good point you made a minute ago about how those two are characters that don't talk a lot. He would have one-liners if he was going to say anything.
Hellboy's at least Del Toro's version of Hellboy is kind of a cheesy guy, and I totally buy that he, like, earlier we have Abe talk about going off by himself and how he likes the whole lone gunman thing. Like, Hellboy thinks of himself as an action hero in this movie.
And that's one of the things that makes him kind of endearing, right? Is that it's that standard kind of, I'm a big softy, but I'm trying to look tough.
Yeah. It also lends to the Del Toro's version of Hellboy, and I think it's taken way too far in the reboot. It didn't need to be there because it's not the comics. But he's a little bit of a man-child. They say he's in his 20s, like, relatively speaking. He's in his 20s.
Reverse dog years.
Yeah. He's in his 20s. He's a young man. And, like, it makes sense that he's building himself into a... He wants to be a cool guy, so he's going to act like a cool guy.
And that makes the title more layered.
Yeah.
Because it's not just this arbitrary name where he was called Hellboy when he was a baby, but now he's an adult and they just kept the same name. I always thought that was weird until I saw the movie.
He's fireproof. He burns himself.
That's weird. Maybe that hand is not. And maybe that's the only part of his body that's not fireproof.
That's going to be a problem when he's making out with Liz. This is a King Kong homage.
Well, he just has to wear gloves.
King Kong breaks the jaw of the T-Rex when he fights him. It's a King Kong thing there.
I would never picked up on that. Eric likes monster movies.
I do. Earlier, when we were running around Halloween, they run past a knight, and I don't know what the other thing is. It's Del Toro and Mignola. That's fun. They have a little cameo. Okay, here's what's super weird about him burning himself.
It's kind of fun that we're shooting this in October.
Yeah. The fireproof line is right after it. It's not like a thing later in the movie.
That's weird. And then with the right hand of doom, he's lighting it. I mean, we know that. I mean, he like that wasn't the thing that was burned, but it is kind of weird that like. Oh, maybe I'm telling it's just that hand.
There's a thing that he does. That Ron Perlman makes a choice in this movie. I can't remember if it's in the second one, but it's in this movie. He rolls his shoulders. I think we're about to see him do it. He often does it right before like a fight. Like he does this shoulder roll. And so there's two commentaries in this DVD because this is back when we cared about DVDs. There's one with Mignola and Del Toro, and then there's one with the cast. And the guy that plays not Myers, what is that? Jeffrey Tambor.
Yeah, the Asian guy.
He plays Manning. He asks Ron Perlman if that's a deliberate choice and to evoke Yojimbo, which is a Kurosawa film. And he asks him right in that scene.
Not to be confused with a rabbit.
Yes. he asks him right in that scene if it's a deliberate choice. He says, well, I was just thinking that, like you've just had all this voltage run through you, and, like, you have to have a reaction. But he does the shoulder roll throughout the film, and I think it might actually be I think he may have forgotten. It might not be, but, like, if you've ever seen the film Yojimbo, which is a wonderful film.
You think it's like a subconscious choice?
Maybe. But, like, Yojimbo has a very... The main character in Yojimbo, well, he doesn't have a name, but they call him Yojimbo. It's the movie that the Fistful of Dollars is a ripoff of.
Oh, okay.
He has this shoulder roll thing that he does, and I think it might actually be... Like, once he said that, I started noticing that Hellboy does it throughout the movie. I was like, no, I think he might have made a choice there to do the Yojimbo thing, or he just made the same choice and it's completely isolated.
That's really interesting. You just reminded me, and we should have said this at the beginning.
I also love that shot that we went past where he's standing like a statue.
Yes, it's great. And makes a lot of sense. It's a cool way to get places. You can't do it outside of every building, but that looks like a more gothic building, and they've got statues like that. But
there's Jeffrey Tambor.
He acts like he is a gargoyle from the world of gargoyles. But anyway, we should have said this at the beginning of the commentary, but there is an extended cut of this.
Yes.
I've never seen it. I wanted to. Of course you have. You clearly like this movie a lot and know a lot about it. And
it has been a while since I saw the extended cut because I don't own it. I own the. I should get it. Like it's relatively cheap.
I'm sure
now.
people were going to wonder which one we were going to watch, and I didn't.
We should have set up
mention it. Yeah, but there is. I've got a really great looking multi-disc set that had the extended cut.
That's the only extended cut release.
That's got that's got those commentaries and everything. I've never looked at the special features on this. I should do that.
And it's got a cool little notebook thing that's supposed to be Rasputin's journal.
Oh, neat.
It's not a journal, but like it's got like pictures and stuff that you see in this movie where like it's the right hand of Doom and things like that. This is all created for Abe. Abe does not have psychic powers in the comics. He is just a fishman.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Or I probably did at one time know that, but I didn't remember. I always think of him as psychic because of this movie.
Everyone does, but he's not psychic. He is immortal, we find out.
Interesting.
Cannot die.
He is a wholly original aesthetic. Like, he just...
I mean, he's Creature of the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, but... I don't know. I always thought he looked really original when I saw this movie. Like it called back to the Creature of the Black Lagoon for me. But
I think he
felt
does
like
in
a
his
thing.
suit.
But that's what I'm saying. Is it felt like a thing that you couldn't put on screen until now.
When you see him in the tank, he looks very Creature of the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
But when he's in like his suit with like the water things and whatnot,
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
When he's in his like street gear, go take ass
and he looks beautiful.
Names.
But Del Toro has topped him with Shape of Water. That design is similar to Abe, but way better. And also he glows.
But you see what I mean? If we adapt the talons, they would look a lot like that.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. We're going to have like a thing here that's like foreshadowing for stuff later. Or I don't know if it's foreshadowing. I guess it's just character detail. But we're going to see him get shot and sand falls out of him, which is very cool. Because later when we see him with his costume off, like, he's not a person that could exist. He's kind of immortal in his way. He's a clockwork man. Like, nothing about him actually makes sense in, like, real world terms. He is a more fable-y kind of character. I think in the commentary he's described as having a surgical addiction. Like, he can't stop doing surgeries on himself, which is why he looks so weird.
Oh, interesting.
He's got all those scars and stuff. He's like, he just keeps messing with himself.
And that's, of course, where this feels a lot less like a big, sterile Hollywood movie, where, like, it's not afraid to do weird stuff.
There's a shot with him
it's not worried about losing
one
the
of
audience.
The scariest, like, weirdest shots in a PG-13 movie since the 80s. Like, it's just not a thing that especially not at this point, like, coming out of the 90s. When we get to see what Cronin looks like outside of his costume, like, it's
haunting.
really far for a PG-13, especially in 2003. But this is all interesting. The like something about Tears of an Angel and
Oh yeah. Well,
It's
it was like Tears of a bunch of angels.
Yeah,
like he had to collect them.
It's just stuff. Like none of that is Hellboy lore, and I would imagine that if we got to the third movie, like we wouldn't. None of that would like tie into anything. Like it's just stuff, but like it sounds cool and it sounds.
Do you think there's a mix though of too many different kinds of fables and myths where like they don't all go together? Where it's like, why is there as much like Judeo-Christian stuff is like mixed in with a lot of this other stuff?
The way that we get it in the comics, and I assume kind of, well, I guess the second movie does, because we get the Angel of Death in the second movie, is...
I mean, he is supposed to be from literal hell, and he's carrying a cross around, so there's already Judeo-Christian stuff.
Yeah.
But...
Well, he's from literal hell, and like I think there is a literal heaven with angels, but it's not...
Okay.
Both of them are more abstract than that. Like...
Because you compare it to Constantine, that's squarely...
Yes. The hell that Hellboy comes from isn't necessarily Judeo-Christian. And then we talk about this at the beginning of the movie, where he's like, is there really hell? He's like, there's a dark place.
Right.
And like, it is all of the hells. Like, it's Greek hell. It is hell. And heaven is...
Because all of those different writings were talking about the same thing.
Yes, and heaven is
from different perspectives.
all of the good afterlife.
Yeah.
Like... And like there are angels and there's demons and things. There are dukes of hell. Hellboy's father was a duke of hell.
So like there was truth in all of those legends.
Yeah.
See, the fire just doesn't look good.
Do you know why it doesn't look good?
No, I don't.
Her hand is CGI.
Oh.
And now you can't unsee it.
You're right.
And they talk about that in the commentary, like, I don't know why they didn't just put fire on my, like, digitally put fire on my hand, but they made the whole hand CGI.
That must have been really weird when you're giving a performance. Because I don't know if they digitally took her hand out and replaced it with a CG hand, or if she's just looking at what's supposed to be her hand as if it was her hand.
No, I think I think they just digitally removed her hand. I think she's actually doing that. Have you ever seen Selma Blair and other things?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so this is my introduction to Selma Blair. I have seen her in other things, and it is strange.
Okay.
Because my introduction to Selma Blair is this kind of, like, homely, like, very, like, covered up, insecure person.
Plain Jane.
They play her as, like, a hottie in other things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Does
like,
it
this
work?
is playing really against type for her. Like, before the... Like, this is not, like, the kind of role she plays and she branches out. She was playing that before this movie. I don't think she's, like, exceptionally, that, like, Hollywood attractive. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that she's not an attractive woman, but, like, I think this makes more sense to me. But that might just be because I saw her in this first.
That's interesting.
But there's a movie with her and...
She's definitely got a unique look.
Yeah.
There's that, 100-yard stare.
But she's got those bags under her eyes like the kid from Chronicle.
Yeah.
That just eternal, like, looks tired.
You just stuck with.
Yeah.
My son has that.
Does he? I guess he does a little bit. I always just assumed he would grow out of that, but maybe he won't.
Hasn't yet, yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like she did a movie with Kristen Applegate and Cameron Diaz. Like, that's the kind of stuff she was doing.
Weird.
Just very strange.
Because just looking at her here, you'd think she'd be in more, like, indie art house type things.
And maybe she does that afterwards, because I haven't seen her in much since. Oh, she's also in Cruel Intentions.
I like Didn't Even Buy Me a Drink. I've always liked that line. Characters like this are fun because he doesn't talk much, but whenever he says something, it matters. Or it's just really funny.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he's of an archetype, at least the way he's being played in these movies, that has been around forever, but that right at this time in film we didn't have a whole lot of, right? Like, we're gonna get something kind of similar to this with Marvin Sin City and like Ben Grimm is like this.
Like the tough guy thing.
The tough guy but has a gooey center, kind of character. These guys that Vince latches onto real hard. Which makes sense, because Vince is kind of like that, except he's not intimidating at all. He doesn't try to be intimidating, but he could if he wanted to, because, you know, he's big. He's a big guy.
Less so with Marv, about the GUI Center.
Yeah, but he's got that... But like, his affection for that one person still feels like that. Because there's at least that one thing
They
he
also
cares
tend to
for
be
that
dumber guys.
brings the humanity out of... Yeah.
Yeah, we used to build films around those guys. We don't tend to do that. Then they're rarely leading people anymore.
Yeah, that's true. You know, the kinds of characters that wrestlers are good for.
Yeah.
Because I guess Drax has that a little bit. I mean, she probably dreams of fire a lot already, right?
Well, I would hope not, because that's what makes her, like, start on fire.
Oh. I thought it was just being, like, angry.
Well,
You know, like,
I mean, it is, but...
Sure, but like, if she gets on fire every time she has a dream of being on fire, I'd think the institution would have gone up in flames a long time ago. Like, there's no way this person doesn't have dreams of that.
So, this might seem melodramatic, but apparently this is a thing that really happened to Del Toro when he was a kid. Not the fire, but the kids, like, throwing rocks at him.
Oh, wow, that's sad.
Yeah.
That was, like, weirdly more common when I was a kid. I don't know, maybe it still happens.
Throwing rocks?
Yeah. I saw that happen a couple times to kids.
Interesting.
And it was horrifying.
I remember...
Oh, and so, yeah, I guess I forgot that she went all on fire because of a dream?
Yeah.
Does that happen every time she dreams of the fire?
Well, no,
or is it just the intensity of that memory? Like,
yeah, it's the intensity, because that's the first time, and we're told later or earlier, I forget if we've already been told or not, but that, like, she killed, like, a couple hundred people when that happened. Like, it's a really traumatic memory.
she's got a real classic X-Men thing, right? Like, she needs to go to Xavier's Institute and learn how to use her powers.
She's also completely different in the comics. This is nothing like that character.
Really?
Now, to be fair, when this movie gets made, there's not a lot with her. She gets more developed in BPRD.
So he really had to make up something. I think it's really nice that we actually get to see him chiseled down the horns.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, all the romance stuff isn't... if there is anything, it's actually... It might kind of have a thing for Abe, but there's nothing between her and Hellboy, and she's kind of a complete reinvented character outside of the fire powers.
So where does the cat thing come from?
Don't know.
Where does the pancake thing come from?
The pancake thing comes from the comics. There is a 2 or 3 page story about Little Hellboy where they're trying to get him to eat pancakes. He doesn't want to do it. And then he eats them, and he loves them. And that cuts to hell, and they're like, oh no, he's had pancakes. We'll never get him back now.
That's really funny.
But the cat thing, I don't know.
He's not eating the cats, is he?
No, he just loves them.
He just likes cats, okay.
He just seems to collect them, I guess.
Because later he saves some cats. I expected, when I first saw this, that he was eating them.
No, he is not eating them. But he eats large amounts of food, which I don't think is really a thing in the comics. But like,
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's like
it's a fun, easy
Flash,
joke. Like,
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that.
And there was a debate apparently on set because he says, "How'd you get this job pushing pancakes?" In the comics, in that comic, he refers to them as Pam cakes, and they were like, "Can we put that in the movie? Is that too cutesy?" But yeah, no, I don't know where the cat thing comes from. I get the impression Del Toro's probably a cat person. But Hellboy's a hoarder in this movie. Again, like, not a comic book trait, but like, you'll see, like, he hasn't thrown any of his TVs away. He just keeps getting new TVs. And he never seems to have a new cigar. His cigars, like, you'll see, like, he has a bunch of, like, studs. Like, he just, like he seems to always be smoking an already partially smoked cigar.
How do you rate that with the character? Like, what does that tell us about him?
That he can't let go.
Yeah.
That he's... And that he, like he's still kind of like a kid, right? Like he's not moving on. He's not getting rid of like his old stuff.
And he's afraid to lose the familiar.
Yeah. He likes the things that he has.
And of course, being afraid to move on is important because of the way it plays with Liz, but also he's trying so hard not to be the demon and the monster that it makes sense that he would latch on to, earthly things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he doesn't
Just
understand like why she wants
stuff he likes.
Why she doesn't just stay where they are. Where he's like, because Hellboy doesn't like change.
Right.
This Hellboy doesn't like change.
Yeah, it's interesting that you have to keep saying this version of the character because he's not the same character.
Yeah,
exactly as in the
comic Hellboy is closer to his 40s or 50s in like the reverse dog year thing because he's inspired by Mignola's dad. Like comic book Hellboy is a guy who goes and does a job. Like he's the guy that comes home from work and like his hands are all cut up from like a grinder or something, and like you're just like, you'll never believe what happened to me. And like
he just works really hard,
but also doesn't think twice about it. It's not weird to him. Like he does like a really dangerous job, and he's like, oh yeah, I did this thing today. Like it's not a big deal or weird, or like he's just a guy that does a job. Like that's how Hellboy sees it, and that's how that character's written, and that's not how he is in either of the interpretations we've had.
Yeah, and it seems like that more recent movie was looking at this really hard for characterization and even for a lot of story points. Like it's weird how much it's the same movie, but then looking to more recent Hellboy comics for a lot of mythology stuff, it just wanted to shoehorn in anywhere it could. But it's weird how it's kind of the same movie.
But just not as good.
So does the comic book version still have the same kind of pathos? The same nature-nurture thing? The same loner, like...
He is more of an actual tough guy.
Detached, I'm not of the world, like...
Yeah, He's not a guy that self-analyzes a lot, and so it's a lot of...
Does he read tragic like this does?
Not really. This is a boy becoming a man story.
Yeah. And this is a coming-of-age story. Like, he's tragic now, but he'll be less so at the end.
Yeah. And the comics really aren't
when he has his arc.
It's a more mature, like, adult kind of a thing of, like, a man finding his place in the world.
So if that happened, it happened already.
And he also...
So I'm right that this probably, even to people that read the comics, reads pretty origin-y.
Yeah. He also tends not to dwell on or think about, like, when, like, he finds out, like, his hand is, like, going to bring about the apocalypse, he's like, well, I'm just not going to care about that, like, until it shows up again later. But, like, he thinks if he just ignores it, it'll go away, and it never goes away. It keeps coming back.
So he's not Clark Kent in Smallville. He's not a worrier.
No, not at all.
And I'm not saying this version is Clark bad, but he's more of a worrier
because he's more of a young man.
Yeah,
and that's really, I think, the difference between the two
He's uncertain.
characters.
He's trying to find himself. He's got kind of a teenage thing going on.
Yeah,
and again, I love that take with this title. I like that Hellboy means something. I mean, once he's gone through that arc, you're still stuck with that title. He's not going to change it. He's not going to be Hell Guy, after this. He's not going to be Hell
This
Man.
is a very close, like, intimate, like, who am I kind of a story, whereas the comics, at least as you look at, like, the whole thing, is more of a, what is my place? What is my purpose? It's not, like, I know who I am, but how do I fit? Which I think is a slightly more sophisticated, not more sophisticated, but it's a less young man kind of a thing.
Yeah.
This is a very young man. It's a boy becoming a man story. It's that very classical thing. But also a lot of that stuff wasn't necessarily there yet in the comic.
We shouldn't say that he's a super introspective character either. I mean,
no.
part of his arc is learning how to look at himself through other people's eyes a little bit, right?
But he's a bit more of a whiner, I think.
Yes, that's true. But not as much as the one from the newer film.
Mm-hmm.
Which was one of the big complaints a lot of people had is he's such a whiner.
Yeah. I like this thing, the bone, a bone from Saint Dionysus, which will keep him safe. I always like weird things like that in movies. Constantine has a lot of those.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is, bullet shavings from the Pope, attempted Pope assassination, and
That's some of
things
my
like
favorite
that.
stuff in the movie because it's just so like blatantly over the top and comic book. Mm-hmm. But it takes itself like perfectly seriously in the context of the movie. Like it's tongue in cheek for the audience, but the people that know what that stuff is, they take it totally seriously.
I believe there is a thing in this sequence that's an homage to a monster movie, but I can't immediately remember off the top of my head. But I feel like there's a shot that's an homage to something.
It's fun how much of a love letter this is to that stuff, and a lot of that never occurred to me until you started talking about it.
Well, and Del Toro does that in a lot of his things, because Del Toro loves that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this. Del Toro has a second house just for his stuff.
Wow.
He has a second house just for, like, statues and books.
He's just got such a collection.
Yeah, yeah. So he said like that was his childhood dream was that he would have another house. He would have a house just for like all his cool things.
See, that wasn't exactly a dream of mine until just now.
And also not super uncommon for rich people. I think George R. R. Martin. I don't think George R. R. Martin's second house is a stuff house. I think it's a writing house. I think he has a house just for writing, but I could be wrong. That's a nod to a thing in the comics that I don't think actually plays in the movie.
What is that?
All of the BPRD's technology sucks. And it never works. Like, very famous, there's this really kind of iconic sequence where they give Hellboy, like, a jetpack, because he's going to go to, or maybe it's a parachute, I can't remember, but, like, it's a thing that goes on his back, and he's got a button, he just has to press this button, and, like, he will like gently, gracefully land on this castle that he's infiltrating. And he's like, "You sure it's gonna work?" Like, yeah, we worked out all the kinks. And he jumps out of the plane, and he's like, click, 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 and then he just hits the ground.
We get shots like this, and I want to go totally back on the stylistic thing I said.
Right?
But there are places where I don't think it's as stylistic as it could be.
So like that gun being like super complicated, and they have to like wait for it to like heat up and like load. Like that's supposed to be that joke. I don't think it plays in the film.
That's never played for me. I never even really picked up on that.
I think that sequence needs like 5 to 10 more seconds to get how complicated that gun is, and
maybe
work.
a couple more examples. Mm-hmm. Just different technology that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I've
always really liked this.
Well, you're
punching while you're falling.
Yeah. Yeah, and like Spider-Man 2 did it.
Mm-hmm. But this does it first.
Does it?
Yeah. Spider-Man's 2002. This is 2003.
This is 04. They would have come out the same year.
It's 04. Okay.
So they did it simultaneously.
Yeah.
I mean, one could not have influenced the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you keep saying 03. It is 04.
It is 04, sorry.
It's the year after Daredevil.
I'm 13. It's
sure.
04. Yes.
Eric's not 13 right now. He's not perpetually 13.
No. I was 13 when I saw the movie.
So everything about the scene reminds me of The Matrix.
That's fair.
And it feels like an almost intentional homage when he picks up the phone that is ringing in the subway and bashes a creature with it.
It's not.
It probably isn't, but it feels like that because I'm just like, Hellboy, pick up the phone and get out of the Matrix.
It is a substitute for gore. He hits him and the coins fly out. And they apparently they considered a couple of things. Like there's a point where it was going to be like a gumball machine or something like that. But yeah, it's supposed to be. It's that comic booky action. It's or like a fighting game.
That's fun.
Yeah, I don't know if the coins fly enough, but that's the idea.
But like he's knocking all the tiles off the walls, just like in the Matrix. But you know what doesn't happen in the Matrix? Stuff falling from the ceiling because you took out a piece of the...
He's going to do the shoulder roll here in a second.
Okay.
That was talking about earlier. This scene has always been iconic.
If you take out something structural, things should fall down.
Oh, it's after he fights him. It's not right there. Yeah. Yes, of course. Well, but the Matrix is virtual. It has that excuse.
Well, yeah, except why would they build that subway right there to do that, but nothing else? Because everything else works pretty much on normal people physics, unless you intentionally, because you know it's the Matrix, can change.
But it's also not in the Matrix, right?
That scene is. When they're in the subway?
In the beginning of the third film?
No, I'm talking about the end of the first film.
Oh,
when he's fighting
oh.
Agent Smith. Everything about this scene reminds me of that scene.
Sorry.
That's what I'm talking about.
I was thinking of the fight in the third film.
Okay, yeah. But no, Neil versus Smith.
Yeah, there it is. There's the shoulder roll.
Okay.
That seems very Yojimbo inspired. I like when the glass falls in his head and he says, ow.
See, I'm just trying to create continuity between commentaries because we're gonna do the Matrix soon.
Yep.
There's just this really amusing, like, sexual motif with Hellboy fighting these monsters.
Mm-hmm.
With all the sexual innuendo he brings to it that I think is really funny.
There's a really cartoony bit that's going to come up in just a second. I think it's hilarious. His eyes are going to go like... There it is. I've always thought that was a funny shot. He also looks great when he's not CGI. Like, it's an amazing piece of, like, puppetry and...
Yeah.
Looks better than anything in movies right now that's CGI. And we need to go back to it and just CGI enhance it. And
so, I don't see how even this many people seeing him, he could continue to operate as if people don't know that he's around. Like,
that's a problem with a lot of the superhero stuff, right? Like, Spider-Man 2 has that. Like, I do not buy that every single person on that train does not...
Somebody would figure out that that's Peter Parker, like...
Or would at least, like, try.
Yeah.
Like, I don't buy that they're all altruistic. Like, yeah, they are in that moment, and then... When the bugle says, you know, $50,000 for somebody that can tell me who Spider-Man is.
Well, and the problem is, in that movie, at least, it's clear that he doesn't want to be known. He wears a mask, in that he wakes up and he's surprised he doesn't have the mask on. He clearly doesn't want people to know who he is. Hellboy doesn't even ask them to not tell anybody about him.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you could argue, well, nobody's going to believe them because everybody keeps talking about Hellboy and nobody has any proof.
Mm-hmm.
But I just assume that kind of thing happens frequently, and I would just think that the sheer amount of people that have seen him, it would get to the point where it's like, well, yeah, Hellboy's a thing.
Mm-hmm. There's the sand. Maybe it's not in that earlier shot. Maybe it's only there. But he bleeds sand.
Yeah, it's so weird. But he's not, like, an all-sand creature.
No, he just has, like, sand in his veins. Like, he doesn't have blood. He has sand. I think there's a line later where he's like...
That would be a weird transfusion.
Where he's like, whatever's inside of him is, like, dried up long ago. Like that, something.
Oh, it's not like he's made out of sand.
No, he's, like, kept alive by dark
deteriorated.
sciences, yeah.
Okay. No, he's a fascinating concept.
I don't like this mask as much as the later one. This, I think, is the weirdest part of the concept. That he can turn himself off. Because he's a clockwork man, so he can make himself die. And then he'll come back later.
So he's, like, pseudo-mechanical?
He's super mechanical. Yeah. Although I want to say that later I actually have an issue with the clockwork man thing. Because I think when he comes back, he just comes back, and I don't know how.
Yeah.
Because the idea here is that he turns himself off.
And
yeah,
I don't nobody turns him on.
Yeah.
I didn't
Groom's
think of that.
examining his body.
I'm assuming it is. Is the explanation for why he's called Abe Sapien the same in the comics?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Where he was... What was it? He was found the same day that Abraham Lincoln was murdered, or...
No, the date on the thing is the same day Abraham Lincoln was murdered.
And then he took that from...
And we explain that in the comics as well. I don't exactly remember what it is, but like it's a whole thing.
So I forget his name.
He was once a human.
The cigar smoking agent that doesn't like Hellboy.
Manning.
So Manning is, of course, that's his name. Like we're not supposed to like him, of course, and he is like. I don't want to say redeemed, but like made more endearing at the end. But I appreciate that even while we're supposed to be with Hellboy, and we're supposed to find him obnoxious. But I like that he has a point in the scene.
Yeah, I do
like,
too.
When the animosity really starts to come up, like, we knew already before this that he doesn't really like having to bring Hellboy on missions and stuff, because he's a loose cannon, and he says that he's too impulsive, and he doesn't think before he leaps and all of that.
And he's not wrong about those things.
He's not wrong about those things, and it never plays as racism. It never plays as he doesn't like him because he thinks he's a monster.
Well,
he's not like, we can't trust him. He's
except for that line that he just had where he said, like once you've killed every freaking monster, there's still going to be you.
Okay, yeah, there's that, but it's because of the way he's acting. It's not because of what he looks like. It's not because he has a tail. You see what I'm saying? He's calling him a monster. I forgot he has that line, but my point stands. He's calling him a monster because of his actions. Like, we can't control this guy.
And I like Jeffrey Tambor a lot. I think he's perfect casting for this role. Like, he's very good at like, being a jerk, but that, like, you still kind of like him because he just has that presence. That shot seems really difficult. The unfolding paper.
I've always really liked this Al Green song, but I actually think Seal's remake is a little better.
Oh, interesting.
Need's a solid word for need. I always like that. It goes without saying, but all the sets in this are really well put together and really well detailed.
Yes. I love this. Really this is one of my favorite, like, little... The floor is covered with notes, and he just kind of, like, tries to sweep them with his feet. I think that's a really funny decision, like, character decision.
Like, that's going to do anything.
Yeah.
Do you think they've got chemistry?
I guess. You know, I never really thought about it.
Because, I mean, this movie does want to be kind of a straight-up love story.
I buy it from him more than I buy it from her until the end.
Yeah.
But I guess that's how she's supposed to be anyways. She doesn't want him.
Yeah.
That Red Bull can is so tiny.
Yeah, and kind of before Red Bull was as huge as it is later. Like,
is Red Bull huge ever?
Well, in the late 90s, I didn't know what Red Bull was.
Oh, I did because...
And into the 2000s, I start seeing it more.
See,
this is around when it starts getting really popular, in my mind, anyway.
I don't ever know it as a product. I know it as... Red Bull gives you wings. I saw those commercials all the time.
But see, I don't remember seeing those until the early 2000s.
I'm definitely seeing those before I moved to Florida, and I moved to Florida in the 90s.
Interesting.
Sorry, in the 90s. In 2000.
It's not important. I don't know why we're talking about this.
But no, I feel like Red Bull never exactly takes off. It's just there, right? Like, I feel like Monster immediately eclipses it.
Oh, really? Because, I mean, I feel like in the mid-2000s, I knew a lot of people that drank a lot of Red Bull.
I've never known anyone that drinks Red Bull.
Oh, interesting. It mixes with certain alcohol pretty well.
I think I've heard that.
I forget what. I don't know if, like, vodka's there. Anyway, we spent way too long on Red Bull.
I would think you would have to be careful because it's not Brenda Downer.
Uh-huh. Yep.
I don't know if we would ever allow something that looks like Cronin, like we just saw him with his mask and stuff off, in a PG-13 movie.
Really?
Like, again. Like, could you see that in a Marvel movie? Or, like, a Star Wars movie?
No, but, like, there's different levels
maybe Suicide
of
Squad.
PG-13, right? Like, yeah. Maybe the big, giant studios that are afraid to take risks with the big tentpole superhero movies, but just because it's PG-13 doesn't mean it's one of those.
Sure, but this kind of is that, so I guess that's why I was thinking of that. Like, this isn't exactly like a tentpole movie, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
It's made like a tentpole movie.
Sure, but it's not yet part of a big, giant franchise. Like, the first Iron Man could have done it.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, before they get... as I don't know if micromanaged is the right word, but before they
become IPs.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I don't think a Marvel movie would do it, but I don't think that has anything to do with PG-13. Well, I mean, it does, but
It's just that they're like 90% of the PG-13 movies that come out.
Exactly, yeah. You're having a hard time coming up with examples of things that
I
aren't
said
those.
Fast and the Furious. Like, sorry.
Yeah, those movies wouldn't do that.
But I think genre, right? Like, Fast and Furious wouldn't have something like that, period, because it wouldn't exist in that universe.
Right, of course, yeah.
I'm trying to think of other genre things. I mean, you probably could have had it in, what's it called? The Valerian.
Sure.
But this is kind of a studio movie.
Yeah, I find myself a little bit frustrated in trying to figure out just how much of a studio movie it is, because there are places where it really, really feels like that. Where it feels super mainstream.
But then also
and then other
is
places where it feels
very
pretty
much like a
indie.
Del Toro, like, passion project.
Yeah. So Eric and I watched this scene differently, I guess. I just don't believe anything about this kid.
No?
I cannot deal with him.
Okay.
He does not feel at all like a real person.
No, he
And,
doesn't.
I think it's hilarious.
But I think this movie is almost a live-action cartoon, and so I guess it doesn't bother me.
I think that's going too far.
Okay.
I don't think a lot of characters in this movie are acting super over the top, except for the villain.
But like even like that thing that I just mentioned, like Hellboy, like trying to sweep it's not like 6 notes. The entire floor is notes. Like everything's to 11 in this movie. Like it's really big.
Yeah, but you don't have a lot of performances that are super big.
No, I guess not.
And that kid is so hammy, and so that he thinks he's in a different movie. Like, he thinks he's in Wayside Story or something. It's weird. The fact that he doesn't break out in a song really surprises me.
This is the shot that I don't think would ever be allowed in a PG-13 movie again.
That's pretty Walking Dead looking.
And then it's that, and then but Walking Dead's TV, and it's basically R.
And to your point.
Yeah, and then this shot here after he puts his robot hand back on. Yeah, see all his scars? He's like surgically addicted. This.
That's amazing.
Yeah, see, that's the thing that's supposed to power him. How did he turn back on? It's always bothered me.
Maybe there was like a time delay thing?
Once I understood what was happening, it always bothered me, because this is the scene I remember, like, watching in the theater and being like, what's going on?
Yeah. Okay, let me suggest this. The movie doesn't tell you, so I'm not saying this is in the film, and that I can really use this, but what it ought to have done was had, like, this might be too corny, was have, like, an alarm sound or something, because he's a clockwork man, right? So couldn't he turn himself off, but set himself to turn back on at some point?
He could, but he takes the thing out of him. The turning thing is, he just put it back in himself. Like, the actual mechanism that turns is gone.
Okay. Yeah. Also, I know this is a young kid, but who doesn't know about the...
It was 2004. It was a different time.
Okay.
But I love this.
So, you know,
the
everything is
to him, I think, is hilarious.
See, that doesn't do anything for me at all.
Oh, see, I think it's really funny. And I like when he gets up, he's like, hey, who did that?
This whole scene is so tedious to me.
Okay. I think this scene is really fun.
I think it interrupts the whole movie to say I'm still a mainstream thing for the people in the audience that don't like this occult stuff.
I guess that's fair.
It's the least genuine kid I've ever seen. How is he not breaking into song?
I mean, I think the scene really exists
Hellboy!
as an excuse for them all to not be here so he can die.
That is absolutely true. And they kind of play it like it's sort of kind of part of a master manipulation plot. Because...
You think so?
Well, yeah, because there's talk about, like, the villain... like I can't remember what exactly, like splitting the characters off and stuff. I don't think he knew that they were gonna go to the park right then, but he does manipulate things to get Liz where she is.
Because he's going to use her at the end, because he needs her for the fire.
Yeah. So I guess it's a happy accident.
Yeah. Or they would just wait for the moment that worked best. I also love that he can appear and disappear, and, like, he just is places. I think that's really fun and cool.
So that's fine, but you need an explanation for why the Clockwork Man came back to life when he did.
Well, yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, he's like a nightmare man. Like, if he could appear and not appear...
His wardrobe is also awesome.
Like, he's leading people to a thing and, like, doing stuff. Like, it would be different if, like, later I'm like, well, why doesn't he just appear now?
Yeah, sure. That's at least consistent.
Yeah. I've always really liked this shot.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because the flaming...
That should have been a poster.
The flaming crown thing is kind of iconic. Mignola did not think it would be in the movie. Like he just assumed that would be a detail that like they're not gonna go through the effort of like rendering a flaming crown. And was just an artistic flourish. He did not yet know that Hellboy is actually the King of England. That's stuff that we don't find out till way later.
So he's just building on stuff he has already.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting because like the new movie has the flaming crown.
I love it when that doesn't.
There's a pop with a flaming crown. Like I think the flaming crown is now something people think of as with Hellboy with the horns, and
I bet people didn't think of anything of it here. Like it never even occurred to me.
Like Mignola thought it was like too crazy for the, or there would be no reason to like go through the effort to actually put it there.
Yeah.
There is a fun thing somewhere.
But again, passion project.
Yeah. There is a fun thing somewhere in the commentary where they talk about, like, discussing, like, what's too far for this movie and this universe. And, Cronen's got that robot hand. He was gonna shoot out, on a chain and, like, roll back into him. They're like, no, that's a little too far.
Is it, though?
Well, he does it in the second movie with one of the big orc guys. But yeah, that was too far for this movie.
So he would have been the action figure for Overkill?
Does Overkill have a chain on it?
That's fantastic. No, it just shoots off.
Yeah.
But it would be smarter if he had a chain on it, because then he could pull it back into himself and not risk losing it.
I also feel like...
Oh, it's really funny that he's drinking milk and cookies. Because there's a line somewhere about how he's not Santa Claus. I just thought of that.
I also really like the bit where he's... I like the rock throwing, I think that's funny, but I also really like the delivery of the line when the kid's like trying to tell him like what he should do in his love life. He's like, "You're 9."
Yeah.
He's also clearly like 12.
Yes.
But I really like the like, you don't even know. You're 9.
I do really like how this puts everything in perspective, and it makes me appreciate the love triangle a little bit more, where it's like, you know, I'm worrying about, you know, my own jealousy and selfishness, and then I let this happen.
Mm-hmm. And I wasn't even supposed to be out.
It's a good opportunity for change. Yeah, exactly.
This is a beautiful shot. I feel like I haven't seen that shot in funeral scenes as much as I would think it would, because it's obvious. Over the top umbrellas parting.
I feel like that happens a lot.
I feel like I see it like from the front, but like the over the top. Maybe I'm wrong.
We did it in Watchmen.
I guess they did.
I'm pretty sure.
But Zack Snyder doesn't have original thoughts.
And so he probably just stole it from this or something. And I can't remember if Daredevil does it. I don't think it
Daredevil
does.
doesn't.
I don't think
there's enough people there to do that shot.
No,
like, it's
they got
4 people.
They got 12
funeral.
extras that day. That's true.
I love
this
shot.
Is my favorite shot in the movie.
He's not exactly hiding, but he's not with the people. Like, he may as well be on the ground.
Nobody's thinking to look up. It helps that they have umbrellas and it's raining. Also, it's always... It's kind of cliche to have, like, tons of rain pouring down during a funeral if you don't have much rain anywhere else in the movie. Because it's like, yes, of course, it's raining because there's a funeral.
I also like the red contrasting with the bleakness, like the dimness of the whole scene.
Yeah, that's a good point. The melody and the score there with that somber tune is fantastic. I also think that's some of the best score in the movie.
But does it fit with the rest of the movie score?
I'm gonna table that for now. I think you might be right. I think maybe it doesn't. But
I don't like this.
But look, on its own, I love it.
This is a thing that bothers me in movies a lot, is the Rubik's Cube thing. So, I know a number of people that know how to do Rubik's Cubes. They're not hard if you're mathematically inclined.
Yeah.
I hate that we treat it like if you can do it, you're a genius. It's not like that. Like, it's just numbers. Like,
I don't think that's a problem in this movie, though. Because it's a way of showing that he's not a genius, and I think that's okay. You see what I'm saying? Like, he can't do the Rubik's Cube because he's not.
But we always do it like it's either like Homer Simpson becomes super smart and he just keeps doing Rubik's Cubes,
right?
Or it's the isn't it funny that Tony Stark can't do a Rubik's Cube? Not that that's an actual scene. I'm trying to think about. Or like Reed Richards can't do a Rubik's Cube, and I'm like, they're not difficult. And Reed Richards absolutely can do a Rubik's Cube. Like,
but those are people who you would expect to be able to do puzzles. Like, Abe Sapien is psychic and he's smart.
He's emotionally...
But he's got he's got, what is it? He's got the right brain before the left brain, right?
Yeah.
Like he's got the... Or is that the other way? No, he's got the art side, but not the math side. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't do a Rubik's Cube.
No,
I'm not surprised Abe Sapien can't do a Rubik's Cube.
No, I'm not surprised he can't do a Rubik's Cube, but I don't like using it as an indicator of intelligence. I'm not that smart because I can't do a Rubik's Cube.
I don't think it's about how smart he is. I think it's about what kinds of things he's good at. I really think it's left brain, right brain.
But that's what he says in the scene. He says...
That he's not smart enough?
Well, not that he's not smart enough, but he's like, well, I'm not that smart. I've been working on this forever, and I've only got 2 sides completed.
I can't remember what the line was. We've talked over it, but...
I also want this library.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I don't even need the books. Like, I'll fill it myself. I just want the library.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And you know what's sad? Because I'm pretty sure this is a set. It's not there
It's
anymore.
not there, yeah.
But somebody had to fill it with books, and then somebody had to take those books off. I was, like, thinking about that with movies, where I'm like, somebody had to clean this set afterwards. Somebody physically had to put those books over there.
Yeah, and just the sheer number of books in this room.
Oh, the other thing I don't like about Abe with his smartness, I should have mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
He reads 3 books simultaneously.
Oh, I forgot about
as like
that.
how smart he is.
Yeah.
But he can only read them as fast as the person walks over and turns the pages. He doesn't seem to do it that often. Like, I guess it's impressive they can keep them in his head at the same time, but it's not like Johnny Five, who like just like, you know, blurs through books. Like, he's not like reading 3 books at once. Like,
yeah, what is that going to simultaneously mean? Like, I could say that if I was, if I had a bookmark in 3 books. I could say, like, I'm reading these 3 books at the same time. I'm not literally reading them at the same time.
No,
like,
but
does
also...
it really mean that he's reading them at the same time?
But, like, an old man, like, walks over and, like, turns the pages occasionally. Like, it's like he's speed reading that. Like, he's not reading them that quickly.
Yeah, and also, why doesn't he just wait until he gets in a suit to read books? Like, can he not be in that very, very long?
That's the idea. That's why he's got the water things.
Oh, okay.
He can't be out of the water for very long, which again is not a thing in the comics. Well, I don't think it's a thing in the comics. If it is a thing in the comics, it's much less so. He's not in the water very often.
So it's not like in the comics like diving where you've got like, you know, a tank of air and you can be in the water for maybe an hour or 2.
It's not like that Aquaman thing, where like when sometimes Aquaman can only be out of the water for like an hour or something like that. And he has to, I think, it's just touch water, which is dumb.
So you mentioned earlier this movie
I love that shot and all of this.
So you mentioned earlier this movie is surprisingly simple for how complicated and hard to follow you thought it was when you first saw it. I agree with that so much. I think the movie's too long, and I think that it's got some pacing issues.
I don't disagree with that.
This is a full 2-hour movie, and I think it could be closer to 145. I think some of the action scenes go on too long, and I like that there's some downtime, and there's some, you know, nice moments to build suspense.
Which is interesting, because later when he does...
and the sequel has the same problem.
When he does Pacific Rim, and maybe this is just a thing when he does the more mainstream movies, but like when he did Pacific Rim, he's like, I don't want it to be more than 2 hours long. Like, I want it to be like a big fun summer blockbuster that's very fast, and that movie needs a bit more time.
Sure.
Or it needs to cut 2 or 3 of the other pilots. This necklace is apparently... This is how much, like, Del Toro cares and loves things. And I think, if I remember on the commentary when they mentioned it, Mike Mignola didn't even notice or know. This necklace is used in a crossover comic that is Batman, Starman, and a Hellboy.
Weird.
But yeah, in that necklace appears, and that's where that comes from. And the corpse is also, he is used completely different, but there is a Hellboy comic called The Corpse where he's carrying around a corpse that looks kind of like that. I think he's hilarious.
Yeah, no, I think that's funny.
I like how he just is like mean to him in German, Russian.
Yeah. That looks all practical to me.
Oh yeah, no,
Like
that's a puppet.
That's pretty cool.
That's definitely a puppet.
I didn't mention while we were looking at it, but while he's digging that up, just in that dark room with the snow coming down, it looks like comic panels. It's gorgeous.
I wish we did. I wish we had an action sequence in the snow.
Yeah,
because it looks beautiful. And then all of this is very pulp serial.
I was
the
gonna,
whole set
I was gonna
design
say,
and like the traps
and Ghost to Indiana Jones places. And it's interesting
I guess
because
it just comes hand in hand with like Nazis. Nazis have like death traps, I guess.
Yeah, well, and like all this stuff is ancient, and so it feels like a treasure seeking, kind of movie at this point. It's weird because it's in 3 acts, and we now have kind of. I mean, it's the same movie. I'm not saying that there's a weird tonal shift, but it's a slightly different tone in that now we're in this different place, and it's got a little bit of that, like you said, pulpy and Indiana Jones kind of feel. But it doesn't feel like 3 different tonal shifts.
No, and it kind of wraps back around to the beginning.
Right. It's not like Act 1 is one thing and Act 2 is another thing, but Act 3 is decisively kind of another thing, right?
But Act 3 meets back up with the prologue.
Sure. So it's bookended well.
Yeah. That shot doesn't look terrible.
No.
Like, clearly CGI, but like that does not look terrible.
But I'm buying it okay.
This also, the corpse thing, I think, is a thing that was way weirder in 2004.
Yes.
Than it would be now. Like, after like, Guardians and things like that. Like,
yeah, the stuff that, air quotes, doesn't hold up as well with this is just because it's more familiar to us now.
Yeah.
There's stuff we do more.
Or I'm not even going to say it doesn't hold up. And
well, that's why I
would
said
have been
air quotes.
alienating to an audience
to
and may have been too weird, I think, in 2004. Now is not.
But I guess I say hold up because it's also not a novelty anymore. So,
yeah.
so some of that stuff would hit you in a different way where like it would surprise you. I'm not surprised by that as much now.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I had a different experience with it this time than I did, because I was really impressed with it when I did the rewind. Where it's like I never gave this the time of day, and I really enjoyed it. I felt a little bit more like I did in the theater the last time I saw this, where like I just couldn't get into it. I appreciated all the character stuff that I appreciated last time. But a lot of the mythology stuff you've been bringing up went over my head, and because I think I just was not into it. And
that's fair.
And some of that is pacing.
Yeah.
So
I really like this bit here.
This is one of those things that's but
he throws them.
But we do that typical thing where the door comes down too far, and you would expect that it had closed, and by the time Hellboy gets to it, it's ridiculous that it's still coming down.
Yes, but it is in the kind of setting that we always do that.
A million years ago.
Like, we do this in the Edge, like, that's that pulp thing, and so it doesn't bother me because
it feels like an homage before it feels like a mistake.
Yes.
Where it's like,
and like this is what we do when
you imagine
like, that door is closed there in that shot.
Yeah. See,
and open back up.
Okay, so that's a mistake. But
the fact that it was closed
going, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But it going that slow maybe is, and I can imagine the filmmakers laughing on the commentary and going like, "See, that makes no sense." But that's what you do in movies like this. So it's obvious to split them up from the group and to make them have to, you do that like Star Trek episode where you take two characters that hate each other and you strand them on a planet with a broken shuttlecraft. It's that, but I like that there is, to keep things in Star Trek terms, a red shirt that's with them that dies, and
he looks like one of the cogs.
Yeah, he does. He's talking about from Power Rangers Zeo, and but where they kind of inevitably come to appreciate each other and work their differences out, like I said earlier, is subtle, and when there's not a big giant thing made of it. Some really nice character stuff with this guy that earlier I felt like the movie was telling me I was supposed to want to see die.
Mm-hmm. It's also interesting because from the neck down, he looks like the putties in Lightspeed Rescue.
We're just talking about Power Rangers now.
I had a thing. Do you think, because I've never had this thought before, but I'm having it now, talking about pacing, can you cut Abe from this movie entirely?
Yeah. He doesn't need him.
Because he's not here in the third act.
I seem to recall him getting more to do in the sequel, though.
Well, yes. He's almost the second protagonist of that movie. Because he's super involved with the plot.
He's one of the things that makes this feel like a setup movie to me. Where it has kind of that X-Men thing.
We'll do something with him later.
He's here because he looks cool, and we wanted to see if we could put him on film.
Now, we use him for plot stuff. We use the psychic thing for plot stuff. But... And maybe...
Yeah, but that makes him a plot device.
And maybe him getting sidelined at the end is supposed to give stakes.
Oh, yeah, we would be too powerful if he was here right now.
Well, not just that, but not like the Professor X thing, where he needs to be taken out because we don't know how to write a third act with Professor X. But, one of them's been gravely injured and, has to stay home already.
Because it's that serious.
Yeah.
And we lost the father.
Yeah, maybe. But I don't know if Abe's actually necessary for this movie.
He's not, but he's also serviceable as the big example of there are other weird things in the world besides Hellboy.
I love that little bit where he throws the stuff in, yeah, I'm helping.
This is my favorite scene in the movie.
Which I've always remembered, but don't know if it's true or not.
Oh, the wooden match.
Yeah.
Keeps the cigar flavor. Ask Dan, he would know.
And see, also to note, it's a stub. He has stubs. He never lights a new cigar.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's like he picks up cigars from places or something. I don't know.
It's so wonderfully subtle.
Character choice.
I love that because what Manning is thanking him for is saving his life, and he didn't even think to say that to him earlier because of the animosity they have to each other. But even before you get to that scene, you can tell he's already respecting him more because he could have just left him to die. And he was admittedly being an idiot for not moving forward, like Hellboy told him they needed to do, and he almost died. But he doesn't have to come out and have this big long-winded apology. And those guys are too tough guy for that. They're too manly. That's why his name has to be Manning. And so they're not gonna they're not gonna come out and have a big cry, and they're not gonna hug.
Yeah.
But it's really great minimal writing, and it's all about the line delivery. Because what makes that scene great is not when Hellboy says thank you, it's when Manning says thank you back. Such a good scene. And it's the thing I most remember about this movie.
Interesting.
I think I had a whole paragraph about it in the rewind.
It's a great scene. Here's another guy who's gonna... Oh, you know what? We kind of do the technology thing again with the grenades. But again, I don't think it plays to the audience unless you know what the joke is. I don't think it plays like a joke. But we'll do it again with the grenades. That the grenades are overly complicated.
So I've mentioned some places where the CG doesn't look great, but 2004, these creatures look pretty good.
Well, that's because a lot of it's puppetry.
But there was that scene where they were all walking around, and some of that had to be CG. Like this stuff is...
No, that's clearly not CG.
Yeah. I think it's enhanced, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, with the eyes and I think the tentacles.
The tentacles, yeah.
But maybe not. The tentacles, I mean, we can do that with puppetry. Like, you go back to the thing. This is CGI.
The way they're fighting right now, yeah.
Yeah. But I think those tentacles are real. I think they are puppetry.
That's cool.
Well, we used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Just used to be how we did things. Like
am I too impressed by that? Like,
well, I mean, when you go to the thing is a lot like they do that Spiderhead thing in It. And I'm like, yeah, it's a lot cooler in the thing when I do love that the rolling out of the eggs. That's great. But like they do that in the thing, they did it practical. They have to CG it. They just had a man's head upside down with spider legs.
I know it annoys some people when we talk about practical versus CG. Like CG is always awful, and that's not what I mean.
No, but practical is always better.
But see, I mean, I don't even want to say that because there are times where if you could make the CG look good, it would be more believable than certain practical effects where you're trying to make a thing that's just too grand to do on a scale like that. Mm-hmm. It just depends on what we're talking about, but. For me, it's always more impressive when I see a practical effect, and it looks really believable, and I'm buying it for a thing that is, like, impossible, that doesn't exist in real life, because I'm like, somebody had to build that.
Yeah.
That's hard to make.
Yeah. Somebody has to be standing over there with, like, a control thing that's making each tendril go up and down as it's needed for the shot.
Yeah, like, it's technically impressive if a CG thing looks real and like it's actually there. I'm like, yes, I'm impressed by that. But when I'm imagining like the sewing and the painting and the, you know, like...
Yeah, it's not how long did it render in the computer.
Yeah. But it
had so much render time.
It is really impressive when I thought it was physically there and I find out later that it wasn't.
Yes.
That is always really impressive. So some of the costumes, the Kryptonian armor and Man of Steel, that stuff's not there. That's really impressive.
I'm always really impressed by like really subtle CGI, like in Zodiac. Zodiac has a lot of CGI, but it's all just background, making things look accurate to time period.
Oh, so, like, yeah, you've told me about this.
They shot on the actual street, and then they digitally made the street look like it did.
And you cannot tell.
No, it's amazing.
No, it's really impressive. And
it would be really unfortunate if it was actually dated and like we went back like 20 years later, like, oh, that is a cartoon city. That is Roger Rabbit.
No, but there. I recently watched that movie on a big screen. And
Zodiac?
I mean, on my projector screen, just on a large enough screen where if it was, I didn't mean the big screen.
Yes.
But on a large enough screen that if it was crappy CG, I'd be like, oh god.
Yeah.
And I remember wondering how they did it. There were some places like this in this movie where you would expect to have some music, and it's effective that we laid out. There are one or two places in action scenes where we lay out of the music, and it's really effective, and we bring it back too quickly. I forget where I had that thought.
I like the lock. I always think of this scene a lot. I don't know why. What are those things called? The things that hold you.
Stocks.
Yeah. The stock.
And bonds.
See, it's like that hand I had earlier, that mechanical hand. Although, why couldn't you just rebuild one of those?
See, now that you say that, it looks so obvious, and it makes me feel like an idiot, because I never thought of that.
Well, and it is a choice that he makes.
Good job, Eric's mom.
And it is obviously a choice Del Toro made, because not the intention of the comic.
That's often the kind of thing that I don't think about until I'm writing about a thing. And I wrote about this back when rewinds were 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get into the plot of this at all, probably.
I like her. She's not in this movie a lot. And don't know...
Okay, she is giving an over-the-top performance, but whenever you're a Nazi...
But you said the villains.
I said the villain. I did not say plural.
Okay.
I was just talking about...
Okay, because Cronin's also over the top. Like, I mean, he doesn't talk, but like...
Yeah. But I'm talking about specifically a performance.
Yeah.
Like that character is over the top by virtue of just being what it is, right? It's not the performance.
Existing. Yeah.
Wow, that guy sure moved around a lot.
We do a shot like that in Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance whenever he does the pants stare, and we don't do an effect, and it looks bad. You remember that in Spirit of Vengeance? You probably don't. But in Spirit of Vengeance, whenever he does the pants stare, he's just looking at people.
Oh, no, you're right.
And we don't do like an effect to
I reviewed that last year.
I've
seen that relatively recently.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. You did for Halloween last year.
No, I did it as part of the 12 Days of Rewind.
Did you? I thought you did for Halloween. No, it was up for nomination for the Halloween that didn't. The Scooby-Doo Batman.
Yeah,
that was 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Yeah.
It's always an eclipse.
This does feel like a full moon kind of day, doesn't it?
You know, for the amount of times that the planets align in fiction, you would think that happens all the time.
Yeah.
It did happen recently. Within the past 5 years, I think we had one of those.
And then you wonder why it happens in the late 20th, early 21st century so much, where it's like, I've been waiting for the planets to align for 550 years, and now finally, it always happens now in modern day. We haven't talked much about Perlman.
No, we haven't. This is, I assume, most of our generation's introduction to Ron Perlman.
Yeah. Well, or they saw him in stuff in minor roles and didn't even know who he was.
Yeah, like they saw Blade 2 and didn't realize that he was the same guy.
Because he was Beauty and the Beast, right? Like, they didn't grow up with...
Well, yes, but that's an 80s show.
That's what I was going to say. They didn't grow up with that.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have known... That was the point I was trying to make. No, they wouldn't have known that.
No, I'm saying...
Our parents would.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe somebody's mom watched it and, like, they were familiar with him, but...
Yeah.
I think for the most part...
I knew of that show. I've never seen it. I've never watched an episode of it.
I watched the first episode, and it's really good. I did not continue, but I really liked the pilot.
And you mentioned Martin earlier. That's him.
He's a writer on that show, yeah. I loved it as a weird subversion of, like, traditional Harlequin romance. Like, it's really interesting.
Because growing up, the only people I knew that watched that show were, like, my mom and my mom's friends, so I always assumed that it was just kind of a soap opera kind of show.
Well, and like my mom knew who he was. Like when she watched this movie, she's like, "Oh, he was Beauty and the Beast." So like she watched it.
But I had mostly just seen him in minor roles.
I hadn't seen Blade 2 yet. And it's when this comes out, I don't think
of that
so.
Because I think of Ron Perlman as a leading man, but he's been in
he's almost never a leading man
most of the time. Yeah.
It's really kind of just Hellboy.
2 years before this, he is the Viceroy in Star Trek Nemesis, and I don't think anybody realized that's who that is.
He's also in, He
was years before I realized it.
He's in, Alien Resurrection.
Is he?
Yeah. Is
he just some army guy?
No. There's a ship crew in that... So remember, Alien Resurrection's written by Joss Whedon.
Right.
There's a ship crew in that is just the Firefly crew. And someone had to point this out to Joss Whedon. Like, he didn't realize that, like, when he did Firefly, he just reused the archetypes. So, in that archetype, he is the Jane.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Gravelly voice guy from The Crow is the Mal. And it is weird casting.
Interesting.
He is just a normal guy. Well, I mean, he's the captain of a spaceship, but, like, he's not a bad guy. But, yeah.
And I mean, like, Nathan Fillion has played bad guys, but you don't think of him as, like, a bad guy actor.
No, but I do think of Gravelly voice guy.
Yeah.
I do think of Michael Wincott as a bad guy. And only a bad guy. I can't imagine a good person with that voice. I'm sure he's a lovely man, but I've always liked that. The cross burns him. And a lot of that's
It's funnier now that we've pointed out that is the only part of his body that's not fireproof.
That's true. This is definitely more Catholic than the comics ever are.
Okay.
Like Christianity is more vague. Like, he doesn't have a cross in the comics. They don't do that. But I would not be surprised if Del Toro was raised Roman Catholic. Growing up in Mexico, like, it would make sense to me that's a thing that he brings to it. I like this double beat. Do you like the double beat? Like, he stops the apocalypse, but then it comes out of him. And so we still, like, it's not the ending. There's still another action piece.
Yeah,
or do you think that's too much?
No, that works for me.
I also love the effect of it under his skin.
I think it'd be
it
too.
awesome.
I think it'd be too easy if it was over. Mm-hmm. Especially because all of the other big action set pieces have gone way longer than this scene, and so it would be a weird place to end the movie. But like, I love the conflicted nature of him in the scene. And this is where I come to really, really appreciate and respect this character, where it's not just as simple as the question of, do I have a choice or do I have a destiny that I can't run away from? It's, am I going to have to embrace that destiny that I don't want to do because I care about a human being? Mm-hmm. And that's a lot more interesting than just that initial basic choice. And so then he takes the risk anyway, in breaking the horns and trying to get away from that.
But we're talking about Ron Perlman. I actually think of Ron Perlman and Nathan Fillion very similarly.
Weird.
Where, like, they were like character actors that both got to be in a geek thing and then were like elevated to fame.
Yeah.
Like, they both have a very similar career path in that way.
That's
where
true.
like, because like my mom knew who Nathan Fillion was, but she knew him from like bit roles in the 90s.
Blast from the Past and stuff.
Something called like, I think it's The Bodyguard. He's in The Bodyguard.
Oh, is
maybe.
he?
So I think maybe. But yeah, like they just kind of knew him. But like, they both become celebrities because of a very short-lived geek project they were involved in.
Yep.
And then everyone thinks of them in like Ron Perlman should be in this, Nathan Fillion should be in this. And both of them are great in the thing that made them famous. Like,
yeah.
Ron Perlman doesn't suck in this, and
no, and
it makes sense that this made
how
people fall in love with him.
How was he not a leading man before this? Like,
yeah.
How was this not his career?
At the very least, a more prominent character actor.
Right. Yeah, how did he not show up in everything?
Mm-hmm. There's a thing in the commentary.
I think he'd have been in a lot more, like sci-fi shows in the 90s and stuff like that.
Yeah. There's a thing in the commentary that doesn't look great.
No, it doesn't.
But it's about what I expect from 2004. I don't think it looks awful. It looks of the time.
We're talking about the CG Hellboy face in the camera.
There's a thing in the commentary that Guillermo del Toro talks about that he's 100% right about, and I don't know who the critic is, but they're just wrong and dumb. He talks about how he read a review talking about this movie where it said, and then at the end, like all superhero movies, it has to devolve into a giant monster fight. And he's like, what other superhero movie ends with a giant monster fight? This also, I think, would have been really weird in 2004.
I mean, more of them now.
Well, yes.
But back in 04.
But in 04, like, Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, the Phantom, the Shadow,
you can count superhero
Superman.
movies almost on two hands still by 04.
Mm-hmm. Like, none of them
at
have
least franchises.
anything
You
like
can
this.
count franchises
Yes.
on your fingers.
But none of them have anything like this, and I also think this maybe was too weird for audience. Like, now, like, because this is before the, like, Lovecraft Renaissance, like...
Yeah.
There's Cthulhu plushies. Everyone knows who Cthulhu is. Everyone knows who Lovecraft is. Even if they're not super familiar with the work, like, they know that iconography. That was not the case in 2004. That was an underground thing. Not like underground, but like, that was a geekier thing. Like, that was a... that's the thing, like, people talked about on not the mainstream.
I was not loving the score when he's fighting that monster. It's just a little too triumphant.
That's fair.
It's a little too, like, standard old school superhero movie. I guess we should have that.
I don't think this is a great score. I will say, like, I think it's a fine score, but like, I don't. I
was talking about one melody and one scene. I think overall it's not a great score. I think we should have that that standard obligatory conversation of whether or not this even counts as a superhero movie.
I don't think it does. I don't think Hellboy's a superhero. He does a job. Like, I guess Captain America does a job too, but like the Hulk, he kind of gets grandfathered, and sometimes in the comics he's a superhero. I don't think Hellboy's a superhero. It's certainly not in the comics. More so in the movie.
Closer than some other things.
It's more so than Sin City.
More so than the Hulk. Sometimes.
Oh yes, but Hulk gets grandfathered in by being, and I think
Right.
the movie is more so a superhero movie because of that kind of mythic legend the boy becoming a man. Like,
Yeah.
it fits more into the superhero framework.
That's what I was going to say. Is the character, especially on the page, I don't think is a superhero, but I think we kind of worked it a little bit into a superhero formula.
Mm-hmm. But like, it becomes like a question. He also doesn't have a costume, and he doesn't like. He's just fighting like monsters. I don't know. I think. Like, at some point, I don't know what the definition of superhero is.
I know.
And anything can be a superhero
And you're
movie.
right, like...
or anything preternatural can be a superhero movie.
He does do a job, but like RoboCop, he also runs off on his own and
but not
just
for
does
good reasons. When he runs off on his own, it's because he's being an impetuous child.
Yeah, but I also get the sense that if he thought he was right, he would still do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not just going to do what he's told.
No.
And he's not just doing it for money.
Well, no. But... yeah, I don't know. I don't see Hellboy as a superhero. Like,
it's not a strong argument to say, and I'm not saying he is a superhero. It wouldn't be a strong argument to say he's a superhero because I can see him being a vigilante. He's not a vigilante, but I can see him doing that.
Sure, but like, I also don't think. Oh man, we talked over my favorite bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Where he talks about where he tells her what he said on the other side. And he's like, "Hey, you on the other side." I just think that's hilarious. But is your like?
I think it's interesting that real quick that the voiceover bookends with different characters. I'm not sure
he's supposed to be the new Broom. That's why he was brought in.
Works. I think the problem with this whole thing is just that the voiceover is obvious and it is kind of like, you know, forcing the message on you, where it's like, no, I get it. Like, I know what we're talking about. I don't know why you had to come out and restate the thesis at the end. But it's kind of fun to have it from two different characters that are, I don't know, ultimately sort of about the same things. But when that wasn't a voiceover that we were told that in story was anything. So when did Myers ever hear him say that?
Yeah.
So that's weird.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine wondered what makes a man a man. I'm like, so did you watch the beginning of the movie?
I also wondered what makes a man a man.
Yeah, all right.
But no, like, at what point, like, does that argument just become like, well, if you have morality, you're a superhero?
If you have morality and you fight things,
like, is King Arthur a superhero?
I think
Robin Hood could be. Like, I could see.
I think it's
Robin Hood's weird because he doesn't have a secret identity, but like Robin Hood, I could see
he's
the
a vigilante. Yeah, because
more
and that's the thing is he kind of has a costume. With Hellboy, he doesn't have a costume, but I think
he is a costume.
Exactly,
it's like a thing.
I think a lot of people. The Tick kind of has that, but I think.
Or does he?
Yeah, exactly. But I think a lot of people would look at a character like that and just assume it's a superhero because they don't look human and they fight crime.
Mm-hmm. And Hellboy doesn't fight crime.
He fights bad guys.
He fights monsters.
That's not crime.
Indiana Jones is a superhero. He fights Nazis.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, the thing is, you want to limit...
Rick Baker did consulting. That's interesting. Rick Baker's a big makeup guy.
No, I know that. Yes, of course. Rick Baker did Men in Black and a million other things. But it's... You want to narrow the definition because otherwise it feels like everything is a superhero.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I always go to, like, because there are things that the rule doesn't apply to, like the Hulk, and I always say the Hulk because the Hulk is a superhero or a superhero franchise because he exists in...
Oh, I forgot this had a mid-credit scene.
Me too.
Oh, well, you would just assume he dies then, and then he's in the sequel.
The Hulk gets grandfathered in because he's in the Marvel universe of superheroes. Nick Fury's not a superhero, but if he made a movie, there is a movie, and you would do it on Superhero Rewind.
Yeah. And the Hulk is sometimes a superhero just because he works with superheroes, right?
Mm.
Like,
to me, like, superhero is, like, if I'm putting definitions on it, it's like goes out and fights crime, probably has a secret identity of some kind, wears a costume. Like, costume's big for me. Like, John McClane's not a superhero.
Right.
And, like, he goes out of his way to fight crime. Kind of. He like goes rogue. He goes rogue and fights those terrorists in that building, and then in that airport.
I mean, you think about the number of things I've done on Superhero Rewind just because they're grandfathered in. There's more of those, probably, or at least before the Marvel movies. Maybe there still are. Maybe there still are more of those than there are actual costume superheroes.
Mm-hmm. Like Dick Tracy's not a superhero, but like
really a superhero.
No, and he's weird because he doesn't really exist in the DC universe except for the couple of times he does.
But like Dick Tracy, I don't think anybody really thinks of as a superhero.
No, but the Phantom is, and the Shadow is.
Sure.
Doc Savage, probably not.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a costume. He's got powers, but I don't know.
It's always hard not to get back into this conversation with things like this, and of course
V for Vendetta is not a superhero.
Yeah, definitely not.
His name is also not V for Vendetta.
Is that?
I was going to say is not a superhero movie, and I just stopped at is not a superhero. Thor Ragnarok is not a superhero. There was nothing heroic or redeeming about that character.
Of course, we had to go back there.
Well, I'm looking at it on screen. Bright is not a superhero movie.
Yeah, we're watching this on Netflix. So we already lost the credits, so I don't know how long those are if they're still going for you guys, but we're not watching them right now.
Did you ever watch that Brothers Grimm movie?
No.
Terry Gilliam made that, which blew my mind.
You mentioned something about it to me, but
it's fine. It's not great. That is a movie that's not as weird as Terry Gilliam wants it to be, but it's not as mainstream as the studio wanted it to be, and so not unlike Hellboy, like I think kind of lands somewhere in the middle. But it's okay. It blew my mind that Terry, but it also stars Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger and Matt Damon.
Interesting.
And it's got Monica Bellucci, who's the Merovingian's wife in The Matrix.
Oh, she's good.
Yeah, she's great.
But yeah, Hellboy is weird because it feels like a really mainstream movie, like it's taking more underground material and trying to present it to a mainstream audience, like Spawn did, except with a cohesive story that didn't get like cut down to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Except for all of the stuff in it that you wouldn't expect to see in a mainstream movie. Like,
I think it almost feels like Hellboy doesn't feel monkeyed with. Spawn feels monkeyed with.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like
Spawn
Guillermo del Toro sat down and wrote a script where he's like, I know the things the studio's going to ask for, and I'm going to start with them there. I'm not going to try and make a movie and then have to compromise. I think he intentionally made a more mainstream movie. And the second movie is less that. I also think if he made this movie now, he would have more free reign. After things like Guardians.
These kinds of movies sell.
Yeah. And, like, I think he could have been weird.
And I think that Hellboy reboot could have done better than it did if it had better trailers and was a better movie.
Yeah.
I also don't think it ever would have done great because a lot of the people that loved Del Toro's movies were just upset that he didn't make his third one because that was a franchise that was never finished.
And I do think that's part of the bad reviews. I think
it's not Amazing
actually
Spider-Man bad in that, like, you don't finish Golden Army and go, oh, well, who cares if we don't have a third one? Like, but you still do want that.
Especially because we knew he had a plan and he knew it was coming. But I think Hellboy is in a weird middle period of like movies where like, when was the last time you saw a movie that had to compromise and have a character like Myers? Like, when was the last time you saw a genre movie that had to have like a completely arbitrary like Eisen character?
Yeah, it's
we don't do that anymore because it's just become part of the more standard pop culture discussion and like understanding. Like, we're just used to it now.
But the trade-off is, even though you had to have that, or it felt like it had to have that, because it was trying to appeal to audiences that aren't used to these kinds of movies and that kind of material from the Hellboy comics, you also have a movie that is a little smarter and a lot more sure of itself than a lot of the superhero movies that were coming out during that period. Because, I mean, it has leaps and bounds over Fantastic Four. And Ghost Rider and even Daredevil at the end of the day.
Well, I think it's better than Spider-Man's.
Sure.
It's on par with the X-Men's.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I think so too.
It's probably not as sharp as X2. But it's very similar to X1.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. And not just because it's a setup movie. I mean, it has a lot in common with that.
Mm-hmm. It's not cut to the bone like X1 is.
Yeah.
X1 almost I don't think of as a movie. It's so cut, like, trimmed down.
Yeah. No, it's more like an encyclopedia entry.
I think X1 is the worst offender in the setup movie, where I'm like...
It is.
Going back to it. Like, I didn't feel that way when I first, but going back to it, I'm like, oh, this is just like a demo reel for, like, the things that you can do.
That's exactly what it is, yeah. But a really good demo reel.
Yeah!
Where it's like, no, totally, the trappings of it, this is what I would want from this.
Or like, maybe the worst...
It'd be nice if I could live in it for a minute.
And I don't hate X1, I think it's... like, very difficult to go back to, because it's just so nothing. Like, it like, maybe the most of all superhero movies feels like a pilot.
Yeah. Well, and the only thing you can really sink your teeth into character and story-wise is Magneto, which is weird because...
And Wolverine a little.
A little.
Because he's kind of the protagonist. Rogue not so much, and she's kind of the other protagonist.
Yeah. That's true. But Magneto is, like, the thing that's interesting.
Yes. Well, and I guess Xavier doesn't even have that much stuff until the second movie.
No, he really doesn't.
And Cyclops never has anything interesting to do.
But, like, nobody does except for, as far as, like, the actual, X-Men that go out and do things, besides Rogue and Wolverine. Because Storm also nothing.
You remember in X-Men 1 when Storm had that accent?
Yeah.
That she never attempts again?
Yeah.
Thank God.
But then she shouldn't have attempted it again, because she kept going in and out of it in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah.
Imagine if we let that happen on Black Panther.
I was just about to say, who I'm glad didn't get cast in Black Panther?
I mean, there is that thing where whoever plays T'Challa's dad, he doesn't go in and out of it. It's just he has
really
like
subtle.
It's not that it goes in and out. It's that they seem to have a distinct dialect for Wakandan, and his dad goes in and out of Wakandan and Jamaican. Like, it's not that he goes to his normal voice, unless that is his normal voice, but it's like a different accent, and like it's just kind of bouncing back and forth something.
But there are a couple of actors in that movie that are not doing what everybody else is doing, especially Forrest Whitaker. We're like, it's not bad.
Forrest Whitaker
has
such a distinct voice in the first place.
That's hard, yeah. But like, I don't feel like Forrest Whitaker is from the same place all those other
like
people
asking Michael Wincott to do a British accent. Like, what does that even sound like? Like, some people just have really distinct voices.
Asking Patrick Stewart to do an American accent. Like, I never want to hear that. Just don't do that.
Yeah, or like if you were to ask, like, James Earl Jones to do, like,
anything else.
Like, Scottish James Earl Jones, what does that even sound like?
What if James Earl Jones was in Black Panther? Like, that would be weird.
And
no matter how close he got, we'd be like, well, that's strange.
Yeah.
You're right. No,
James Earl Jones might be in Black Panther. In one of them. Not like he's not like secretly in Black Panther.
I was like, do you have an opinion on this? He's not in that movie.
He could be. He was just hanging out in the background.
He could. I don't believe you, Cap. He could be. Well, everybody, thanks as always for listening. We sure hope you enjoyed our Hellboy commentary. Eric, thanks for all the insights, because I did not know a whole lot about this project and learned a lot from you, and wish I had really never done a rewind or talked about this movie at all until I did this with you, because now I know more about the material. And
but I don't think it's required reading, like, to enjoy the movie on its own terms. Like, although rewatching it, I rewatching it thinking about other people.
Yeah.
It's a good primer. Like, if you like the movie, you really should go read the comics.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I don't think you need the comics to appreciate the movie, but, like, if you like the movie, you should go with the comics. Or if you like I guess the mythology side of it, because, like, the character stuff's not exactly there. Also, that first miniseries, real rough.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's not written by Mignola, it's scripted by John Byrne, and John Byrne is overwriting the crap out of it.
Interesting.
I would actually, if you're going to buy, like, the hardcovers, like I have, the library editions, I would, if you think you might like Hellboy, start with Volume 2 and then go back. Volume 2 is all short stories and gives you a really good sense of what Hellboy comics are like.
It doesn't require any prerequisites.
No, because it just jumps around the timeline. It's just, here's Hellboy going to England, here's Hellboy doing this. Like, if you've seen the movie, like, you've already got, like, and then go back, because those first two miniseries are important.
And I've also never seen the animated films, and I've got them, and I'll do rewinds on them eventually. But
I don't have strong feelings. They're fine. I want to like them more than I do. They're just fine.
Because, like, stylistically, that looks like more what I would want to see, but I don't know how they are story-wise.
They're fine.
People tell me one is better than the other, but I...
And I think the one that people say they like more, I don't.
Oh, interesting.
The second one should be better because it's dark and gothic and uses some of the characters from the comics. But I think it's just kind of dull and boring. The Japanese one doesn't feel like Hellboy really at all, but it's at least kind of fun. And it adapts one of my favorite Hellboy short stories, which is called Heads, like wholesale, and I enjoyed that. But anyways, I could talk forever about this.
Once again, thanks a lot for listening. And we'll see you next time with another commentary. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
Bye, everybody.